appears that we're ready to go, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. The clerk has confirmed we have quorum, and we'll start with a land acknowledgement video.
We acknowledge the land we are traveling on is the traditional territory of many nations,
including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa,
the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge
that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa nations.
Land acknowledgements mark an important step in the process of reconciliation and building a positive relationship with Indigenous peoples. It involves thinking about what happened in the past and what changes can be made going forward. We're all accountable for these relationships. Every day I encourage you to take a moment and reflect on the land that you work, travel, and live on.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Okay, so we're now going to move into declaration of interest. Commissioners, do you have any declarations of interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Any? Seeing none. I'm going to now not read, that would take a very long time. I'd ask for approval of the minutes. Commissioners, anybody would like to approve the last minutes, July 7th? Commissioner Jaglio, you are the approver. So all in favor? And that carries. So again, my traditional words at the beginning of every meeting. It's important that you're aware it's an open meeting, and the agenda today, if you have any requests to speak or to move motions or to ask questions, please send those email requests to the clerk. As you know, each member has 5 minutes for questions and to speak, and the timelines will be adhered to. If you wish to submit a motion, as I said, please email them in. And if you have any technical problems, please make sure that you let us know so we can do our best to help you with those technical problems. Before we do the agenda rundown, I would just like to start the meeting by recognizing that the TTC celebrated its 100th anniversary on September 1st, 2021, an incredible milestone. And many of the board members, the commissioners were there to celebrate, and the TTC employees. Of course, and ACAT was there, represented by Igor, and we'll hear from Igor later today. But it was a wonderful celebration. We also had a number of the past chairs of the TTC present. So it was quite a seamless event, given that we were navigating COVID. And I just want to thank from the bottom of my heart every single TTC staff member that worked on this. I know a lot of effort went into it throughout the course of the summer because it was basically at the tail end of August, the beginning of September. And Roncesvalles Yard was incredible with the vehicles, young to old, and it was just a phenomenal event. So stay tuned, because we're hoping that we're going to have a larger event, a larger public event versus more of a press conference when it is safe to do so in 2022. So we're going to go big down the road, hopefully, if everybody gets their vaccinations. And again, thank you so much to the staff who worked so hard pulling this all together. Not just this, but many other aspects of the celebration, including what you're seeing in the TTC stations, the commemorative booklet, the website. It's just a phenomenal, as I said, effort. I do want to acknowledge 2 people, and that's a dangerous thing to do because so many people were involved, but there was 2 people who went above and beyond, and that's Deb Brown and Scott Haskell. Thank you so much, Deb and Scott, for your incredible work on this and making this a very magical, memorable celebration of 100 years of this incredible institution we call the TTC. Thank you very much. And I'm going to now move on to the review of the order paper. Somebody does have their mic on, so if I could just ask them to mute their mic kindly. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got a number of items before us. We're going to start off with the CEO report. I'll hold that under my name. ACAT report I'll also hold. We have a timed item today from Student Move TO, so I will hold that and we'll deal with that item first. The Auditor General is here and we're going to have a brief presentation from her. Line 3 bus replacement study update. That's the next item. If somebody, I think Councillor Lai asked to hold that. Am I right? Yes, I am. There she goes. So we're holding that under your name, Councillor Lai. I think there's other commissioners that have interest in that matter. Number 6, transit network expansion update. Commissioner McKelvey would like to hold that, so we'll put that in your name. McNichol Bus Garage Facility Maintenance.
Hold that, Madam Speaker.
Okay, I'm going to
Or
hold that, and
Madam
Councillor.
Chair, I should say.
You can call me whatever you want. Okay, we're going to hold that in Councillor Carroll's name. Item 8, streetcar vehicle cleaning and servicing. We've got deputations on that. And then COVID-19 vehicle disinfecting services. Again, I'll hold that because we have deputation. Wilson Yard infrastructure work for signals and miscellaneous site services. I think that one's good to pass. And anybody want to move that? We can do that right now. Okay, Commissioner Lalonde. I almost called you Councillor Lalonde. How would you like that? Look at, he's got a big grin, big smile on his face. He's running in the next election. I can see it. We've inspired him. Okay, so Councillor Lalonde has moved that. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Number 11, Duncan Shop bus hoist replacement and revenue repair area. Would anybody like to move that? I will move that. And all those in favor? That carries. Structural assessment and design services Trinal contract. Did I say that right? Anybody want to move that? Okay, Commissioner Osborne is moving that. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Loan agreement to Toronto Coach Terminal Inc. You know what? I'm going to hold that for now. I have one quick question on that. So, financial update for the period ended July 3rd and major projects update. Okay, so I don't see anybody wanting to hold that. If you could just bear with me, I'm just going to say a couple quick lines on that and we can dispense of this item. You know, the shortfall is worrisome. I guess we're not really surprised by it. But I do think it's time to start thinking about next year's budget. So I know the CEO will probably mention this in his remarks. Both he and I, independent of each other, will be writing letters to the provincial funding partners on behalf of the TTC board to advise them of our current financial picture and our projections to the end of the year. So I think it's very important to shine a spotlight on this issue. And so unless anybody has any issues with that, I don't need a motion, but I would be writing a letter on behalf of this body, just really highlighting what's happening financially for us. Is that okay? All right, so I will do that. Thumbs up, and I'll move that motion. I'll move that item. All in favor? That carries. Okay. Next one is the City Council Transmittal Toronto Newcomer Strategy 2022 to 2026. Somebody want to move that? I can move that. All those in favor? That carries. City Council Transmittal Item 17, Safe TO, Toronto's 10-year Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Somebody want to move that? So Commissioner Lai is moving that. All those in favor? That carries. 17 is a notice of motion, TTC fare card request for information submitted by Commissioner Denzelman and Wong, and seconded by Commissioner Cynthia Lai.
Give me 30 seconds and I can release it.
Okay, that's fine. Is everybody okay with that? Go ahead, Denzel.
Yeah, no, this is just for more information. We're going through the RFP process. We had the vendor days, which were really long, but through my discussions with staff, exceedingly productive. And this is just looking at, these vendors. We look at all the promises they make, but really it's the relationships with where they've been, including Presto. That's key. Previous conduct is an indication of future conduct. And so I want to get a report back on what the record of these vendors are.
It's fine. All those in favor?
Can I vote 2 hands up?
Oh, wow. Yes. Wow. Absolutely.
Great motion.
Denzel's been busy over the summer, I can see, because number 18 is also a notice of motion from the commissioner. Community benefits.
If you give me 30 more seconds, I'll release
Okay.
that one.
So community benefits program for Eglinton Crosstown LRT hiring.
Yeah,
Seconded
so-
by Chair Jay Robinson.
Well, then you have to support it. But, this is just an arrangement. I'm haven't been historically supportive of community benefits programs, but if you can't beat them, join them. The LRT itself, we're hiring a bunch of operators, and if there's a community benefits program where we can go into neighborhoods but not exclusively, Thorncliffe and Flemington, these are great jobs. They're like jobs you want to grab onto and hold on to, and they help families. And in our areas, in a high needs area, we should be looking at hiring people from those areas, and because it is a great career to work for the TTC. And so I just want them to set a target from hiring in those neighborhoods, have job fairs and promotions to let people know that these great jobs are available. Can't hear you, Jay.
Great motion.
Yeah.
Support.
Thank you very much for this, Denzel. And as many people know, Thorncliffe Park is being hard hit by the Ontario line. It's been well promoted in the paper, and this is a great motion, as the vice chair just said. So thank you for it. All those in favor?
Sorry,
Opposed?
Jay,
Yes.
Yeah. Just on that note, I've written to Metrolinx asking for a community benefits program for the construction and operation of the Ontario line, so that folks from Thorncliffe and Flemington will benefit from the jobs that might be available there too.
Yeah,
So-
that's excellent. Thank you for all that. It's wonderful. And a lot of the new refugees coming into Canada in the last few weeks are actually landing in those neighborhoods that we've identified, particularly Thorncliffe Park. So it's been quite a time there. So we did move that, and it was adopted unanimously. So we will now move to the top of the agenda. Just to be clear, we have items held 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, and 3, which I might release at some point. So we are going to start now with the item 1, which is the Chief
Madam
Executive
Speaker,
Officer.
Can you
Yes.
repeat that?
Sorry to interject, Madam Speaker, but 7, 8, 9, I want to hold each of them. So if you would, rather than release, go through.
No,
the
that's what,
usual order.
no, I mustn't have been clear. Those are the ones we're holding. Those are the ones we're dealing with.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you
I'm-
might release them at some point. So
No, just item 13 I meant, the one I held.
Oh, okay.
Item
Sure.
13, I said that one I might release. The other ones are on the agenda. Commissioner McKelvey?
Sorry,
you-
I didn't hear you say 5 and 6 in that. So is it 1 to? 1
Yes,
to 9?
you're right. 5 and 6 are there, but
Okay,
I
so
missed
1
them.
to 9.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 13. So good catch. I checked them instead of put a circle. Big mistake.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that clarification. So we will now pass it over to our CEO for his update and report.
Chair, sorry, it's Chrisanne. We're starting with the student move TO timed presentation.
Oh, okay, because they're on a short time. Right. Okay. So let's do that instead. That's a great idea. So the student move TO, this is a regarding moving post-secondary students in the GTHA and the preliminary results from a survey and study on student mobility in the Toronto region. So we want to welcome them. You have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chrisanne, can you please enable me to share my slides? Can I do that myself?
Yes, Roger, we'll share your deck for you.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, and the board for allowing us to present our preliminary work here at this meeting. My name is Roger Kyle. I'm a professor at the Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change at York University. I'm here with my colleague Dania Tag from Ryerson University. She's the project manager, and she will do the second part of this short presentation. The principal investigator of this partnership development grant is Professor Rakta Mitra, who unfortunately could not be with us this morning. Next slide, please. This project is called Student Move TO. It's a partnership development grant, which is a grant supported by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. It is actually the second such research that we have done together. It started with the 4 universities in Toronto and now contains 10 partner universities and colleges in the GTHA, also 4 partner organizations in government and community, and you see some of their logos here. We did this shorter survey in 2014-15 and decided to go deeper and then applied for the second grant, which we then now are about to conclude. Next slide, please. So what is Student Move TO? It's a 3-year research and partnership program, which is focusing on an improved understanding of the travel behavior of 600,000 post-secondary students in the GTHA. This number is large, and it is surprising that not a lot of research has been done on this very large group of people who are using public transit in this area. So what we're trying to find out is the transportation pattern of this important and understudied population, and potential social and environmental influences on their travel behavior and the effect of students' travel on their social well-being in urban systems. You can, of course, imagine that we did not account for the pandemic, and that changed a lot of those environmental factors that we had to look at. Through our partnership, and it's very important that it's a partnership of research institutions, teaching institutions, and partners in the community. This research will create, or we should say has created, new pathways for public policy, institutional planning, and enhanced student support services. And this is one of the reasons why we're here and happy to be here this morning. Next slide, please. The core of this work is a state-of-the-art survey. Again, the second of its kind. The first one was 2014-15, but this one was larger and more comprehensive, and it was conducted just before the pandemic started in October and November in 2019. We used customized survey software developed by our team and included a travel diary. We reached out to all students, which was an enormous undertaking, of course, with the help from university and college staff and our own student volunteers. All in all, about 18,500 students responded across the GTHA, which is a 5.8% response rate, which gives us a great number of results to work with. 13,130 respondents attended a campus in Toronto and would then, of course, be in the area of the TTC and would use TTC network vehicles. Next slide, please. We also did some qualitative research, or are doing qualitative research. I am responsible for that here at York University. We did 40 interviews since the summer of 2020, and more is being planned. This was supposed to be larger with focus groups and so on, but you can imagine you can't put people in a room during a pandemic. So we decided to go just with interviews. and we adjusted our protocols to the COVID conditions. The main topics that we discussed with the students that we asked were accessibility, travel distance, time and cost, safety in the system, technology and shared mobility modes, and of course, we adjusted our questions to travel under COVID-19 restrictions. Dania, I'm handing it over to you with the next slide.
So this map here shows post-secondary students' residences and the location of participating institutions. As can be seen on the map, students live in all parts of the GTHA, as well as smaller population centers beyond its borders. As a result, many students have long commute times. Results from the Student Move TO survey show that 30% of college and university students have a one-way commute time to campus of 1 hour or more, indicating that these students spend more than 2 hours traveling to and from their campuses every day. With the average one-way commute taking 45 minutes, long commutes can limit students' abilities to engage in activities which can impact their academic experience and overall life satisfaction. Better understanding students' commutes can support evidence-based policy and improve service, which can positively impact students' commute experiences. Next slide, please. We're now going to show you some of the ways that Student Move TO data can be used to better understand students' commuting experience, specifically with regards to the TTC. This chart here has all the campuses that are part of the survey that are located in Toronto, except for 3 Centennial campuses, which are Downsview, Eglinton Learning Site, and Performing Arts Commons, due to the lack of data at these 3 locations. And on this chart, as you can see, the percentage of students whose main commute mode to campus is broken down for each of the campuses. And this ranges from 40% for Centennial College Ashtonby campus to 61% for Centennial College Story Arts Center. And to learn more about this, it could be further broken down to see the percentage of students at each campus whose main commute mode is subway, streetcar, or bus. Next slide, please. So these here are heat maps to show the hotspots of trip origin and destination of all trips taken by students in the day. These maps were created using the travel diary from the survey. The travel diary had students report all trips taken in the previous day. The orange dots are each of the campus locations. In both maps, all campus locations are hotspots, which shows that campuses are some of the main locations students go using the TTC. With this data, you can also map by time of day, such as morning, afternoon, or rush hour, or such as the middle of the day or late night, as well as by trip purpose, such as going to campus, to a place of work, running errands, or leisure, to better understand post-secondary students' TTC patterns, and this can also help plan service changes. Next slide, please. So this chart here shows the percentage of students whose main commute mode is subway to York University in 2015 and 2019, the 2 Student Move TO service years. This was done to see if and how the opening of the 2017 York University subway station had an impact on the number of people taking TTC overall to York, and if it changed the mode split between subway and bus. Between 2015 and 2019, the percentage of students whose main commute mode subway to York University Keele campus rose from 24 to 38%, and the percentage of students whose main mode was any TTC mode rose from 63 to 68%. This is an example of how the data can be used to see the effect of service changes. Next slide, please. So thank you for listening to our presentation here today. If you want more information to learn more about Student Move TO or access the data, you can go to studentmoveto.ca.
Okay, thank you very much. And we've got questions for you if you're ready for those. Thank you for your presentation, very detailed. So Roger, I'm not sure who's taking the questions, but we'll start now with Commissioner Carroll, followed by Commissioner Jagdeo. Go ahead, Commissioner Carroll.
Yes, thank you. And thanks, Chris-Anne. I'm going to drive you nuts with emails again today. Hello, Roger. It's a long time no see.
Nice to see you.
Yes. The question I wanted to ask, the big general question is, this study looks at travel and particularly that last slide, let's call it the grand finale slide, the mode change, just by adding rapid transit as a way of getting to York is a very happy ending. But I just wondered if you wanted to comment on whether or not this is true or not. We had at an APTA conference a few years ago, a futurist was the main speaker, and he said, you don't necessarily have to plan your transit expansion around getting to campuses. The move to connecting suburban campuses was all across North America, but he said you don't have to do that because with MOOCs, with mass open online courses, people won't really be taking transit. But your data show that that's not necessarily true, because even in 2019, there were a fair number of online courses in regular degree granting programs at York, and yet people are still needing the transit connections. Am I reading that right?
Yes, absolutely you are. But of course, this is a wasp's nest of current conversations amongst my colleagues at universities more general. We never had a real-time experiment of the kind that would be the pandemic lockdown of these large institutions. Of course, people, I think the MOOC example is overblown in the discussion as it used to be. They were never going to be replacing in-person, in-classroom type education. But what we now know, of course, is that a lot more people, like as we are doing right now, we're having a meeting online, a lot more people have gotten used to the idea that you can deliver some aspects of education without being in the personal presence of the instructor. I will teach this afternoon online, I will teach tomorrow morning online. So people are getting used to this idea. Whether institutions, brick and mortar institutions, will pivot entirely to that is a question of the future. I hope not, and I don't think it will be the case. York University, which was the subject of this question because of the subway, has shown resilience in bringing people in. In fact, people are welcoming the idea of being at an institution in a real place for learning for other reasons than just being fed information that I will feed them through a taped or a recorded lecture that I speak to a microphone for. Education and learning is more, and research definitely also, more than just being fed digital experiences. So the question is up in the air for now.
Yeah.
It was clearly not part of our question catalog when we started this research, but in our qualitative interviews, we have tested this question with our interview partners, and we get very diverse answers. Some people are some students are very comfortable with this environment, and others are not at all. And that is like in the general population. So I don't think students are any different from anybody else.
Okay, and just one other question. I didn't see it highlighted in the presentation, but I'm wondering if it was part of the research questions. We're struggling to build housing around campuses, but was there any question? We know that people with long journeys, if we give them higher order transit, they're going to use it if they have a long journey. But even if we do achieve getting affordable housing around campuses, do those students that live in close proximity to the campus, do they tend to is there still a high percentage of those that are still going to choose transit as their principal mode of transportation?
Yes, they are, but they may have to also rely on other services. Very little car ownership in the city. That's different in places like Hamilton, where they draw in students from smaller villages and towns in southern Ontario. But in the Toronto area, very little car ownership, but a lot of rideshare services are being relied upon. Don't forget that the students have jobs and they have relatives to visit and all that, and that cannot always be done conveniently by public transit services. And if you work in a warehouse in Brampton, but you live in Toronto and you work at the night shift, then you have to rely on other ways of getting around often.
Right. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jaggio, you're up.
Roger, Danya, thank you so much for coming this morning and sharing this. I find all of these insights so compelling, and it would be foolish for us to not ask students, whether they post-secondary or even elementary, what their thoughts are, considering they're going to be the people that we move for the future. I only have one question, and I was hoping that this presentation would also come with any tailored insights or recommendations that come out of the data, because showing data is great, but part of our jobs, especially as we think about expansion and operations, is, well, what's the so what? So I don't know if you two or your team have come up with any high level recos or ways to take this data and actually make it useful, or is that next steps for you, or is this just, here's the data, run with it and see what happens?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Commissioner. I would be foolish to now make any such recommendations to a group like this. It could be misunderstood as if we already had had the discussion and had evaluated the data to that degree that we could make that. I think one of the important thing is to make the recommendations in further consultation and conversation with the communities that are affected. So this is the process that we're involved in right now this morning, is to have these conversations. What I would hope is that the TTC board would ask us particular questions on the basis of what you now know we have. And we have a lot of information that we distilled this morning in just a 10-minute talk. But if there are particular areas that you would like to have further information, we would be more than willing to dig down in our data and come up with more specific information, and to also make policy recommendations, or attempt to at least begin such a conversation. All of us are committed to issues of transit justice, and the idea that we need to, and that goes back to the previous question about housing on campus by Commissioner Carroll, is how do we create justice in the distribution of access, in the distribution of cost, in the distribution of convenience in the system overall, and what can we do for this particular large group of people who are, of course, in some ways transitory, and they are a particular age group, most of them, but they will soon make a decision on where to live in the city, and where to find housing, where to find jobs, and all those kinds of things. And so this reaches into the main domains of urban planning, regional planning, I should say, because of course this is not a City of Toronto question only. And we would be very happy to continue the conversation, but I'm hesitant to make any clear recommendations this morning.
Got it. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I don't believe we have any further questions for you. So Roger and Dana, thank you very much for this insightful report and presentation. Is there any speakers on this item? Anybody want to speak on this item? You can't move motions, obviously, because it's a presentation, but go ahead. Again, thank you to Roger.
Thank you very much for having us, and you know how to get in touch with us. We would welcome a further conversation.
Yeah, we know where you live. I'm just seeing Commissioner Osborne. Did you have a question, or did you want to speak?
Just a quick statement.
Next, Commissioner Carroll is going to speak first, and then followed by you.
Thank you. Okay. I just wanted to further expand on the answer that we got from Roger on the issue of online and in-person learning, and because we do often hear that don't worry about campuses, and I'm so happy to hear that after exhaustive research, what we're hearing from a real respected expert in the field, that changeover is overblown, and that we do have to continue to plan for the transportation and transit traffic, so to speak, that that collects on campuses, because yes, there will be virtual learning, but in post-secondary, there's no question that there will always be that need to go to that campus and do all of the things around a lecture that you might watch a recording of. And yes, they do work as well as studying. And so there is so much travel back and forth. There's the need to touch down at the campus and the need to travel back and forth. So I'm just really happy to see research that tells us that, yeah, we will use technology, but we will always need the campus. No question about it. We didn't even touch on beyond the students, the whole research arm. That's always going to need a home, a brick and mortar home, all of that stuff. And so this is very valuable research to us in terms of transit planning, and should be to Metrolinx as well. The only other thing I would say was my question about housing is because I think we sometimes think we solve the problem if we just create more housing around universities. All we solve there is the housing and the affordability of student housing problem. We need it. We very much need it. It's one of the reasons that Council in a month's time will look at enhancing the offering of legal forms of housing around our suburban campuses. But that same description holds for those students. If we can find the proper legal forms of housing by looking at our multi-tenant houses at the end of the month, they will still need to get to campus, and sometimes that's just a few bus stops away, but they will also need to get to jobs that are all over the GTHA. They may need to go to placements and research that they're doing off-site and still need to get back. And so continuing to design really top-notch mobility around our suburban campuses, even though we're looking at improving on the housing situation, it's always going to be needed. And I'm just very grateful that we have a research document that shows us not only do we need to continue to do it, but that the TYSSE has already shown its own investment payback in that huge mode change from 25% to 40% now using transit to get there. Thanks for that research.
Thank you. And now we'll move to Commissioner Osborne.
What I wanted to observe actually carries on from what Commissioner Carroll just mentioned, and that is all the stuff that I'm assuming didn't get measured, but contribute to campus life up at York in particular, which was the one, where the subway traffic was measured, the impact of the subway. And those are things like the art gallery at York University, the tennis center, where those are big parts of the campus that now are just way more accessible, not only for the students, but for other people who want to go and take part in activities at these places. So very encouraging to see those numbers, and you can see how the ripple through not just the direct student life on the campus, but the community at the campus has been impacted. Thank you.
Good points. Okay, thank you very much. And so request for a motion to receive the presentation. Commissioner Carroll, I'm guessing you want to do that. There's your hand. All those in favor, approve, that carries. Okay, thank you again to Roger and Dana. Excellent presentation, very informative, and an asset for us. On to item 4. This is the Auditor General's report, Toronto Transit Commission 2021 results of the follow-up of previous audit recommendations. So I would now ask the Auditor General to make a brief report on this item. If you're speaking, we're not, okay, maybe we're hearing you now. Can you just do a test?
Auditor General, you're on mute, I think.
Oh, can you hear me now? Yes? Thank you. This is a follow-up of many audit recommendations from many reports. I'm here with my Assistant Auditor General, Tara Anderson, and I would like to also thank my team Tara, Susha, Elaine, Faison, Susanna, Claire, Fengmu, Angela, Nero, and Vivian. And also, there's many people from TTC who have been very, very helpful in making sure these recommendations have been implemented. It's been quarterbacked by Kirsten, it's been quarterbacked by Rick Leary, and also with Josie Levita. And Tara Anderson, my Assistant Auditor General, will identify for the Commission as she goes through her part of the presentation some of the noteworthy results, but also the people who have been assisting with those results. Next slide, please. So as you know, follow-up is part of my mandate, and this presentation is going to go over the recommendations we have from the follow-up report, the results, and really the noteworthy, a lot of positive noteworthy results here, and the next steps. And as you know, when I conduct my work, I don't hold any punches. I call it the way I see it. And not always are the results. There's sometimes the results, there's lots of improvements needed, for example. And so I'm like a doctor, it's like we have a prescription, but it really takes management to implement those recommendations. And when we go back, some people don't put the recommendations in place, but most do. And TTC, it's important to recognize when the recommendations are implemented because it takes a lot of hard work. And it's also a catalyst for change going forward. I think what's noteworthy for me, just at a very high level, has been the culture shift in certain areas that I've seen. In the materials management and in the procurement areas, I have seen a change in working together, continuous improvement, and I'm sure that's spilling over to other areas, but I did notice it in that area in particular. Very excited in that area. It's just congratulations to the entire team. So next slide, please. So we've implemented a new system. What it means is that we can provide better information, more timely information to your audit committee in relation to how far management is moving on each of the recommendations. It's an online real-time opportunity as management uploads the results of how far they progressed on their recommendations. So we have that in place. We continue to audit all recommendations, and we audit them in order of priority. So we use as many resources as we can to get to the recommendations in order of priority, with the highest priority first. And the highest priority are those items that relate to potential savings, safety, or they've been outstanding for a long period of time. And so we've audited the high priority items for this round. Next slide, please. I'm just going to put this slide up and walk through very quickly at a high level the number of reports that were outstanding. When COVID hit, we didn't go in to do new work. What we said to TTC was, you're struggling with all the shifts that are happening, so continue with that, but just focus on implementing what we've already put on the table. And as part of the shift, what we saw was that the objective to implement these recommendations was included in some of the performance appraisals, including, I know that Kirsten and Josie have identified that they've included in their performance appraisals, and that's fantastic. So the reports that we're reporting on today are items related to Wheeltrans, bus maintenance shops, around warranty administration, around non-revenue fleet for the bus maintenance and the shops department. We looked at materials management recommendations. We've looked at continuing controls around overtime. We've looked at items related to procurement and materials management, recommendations related to accounts payable. Next slide, please. And recommendations related to reviewing complaints that came in against the former head of the TTC, recommendations related to managing telecommunications, procurement. We've looked at employee expenses related to recognition programs, core component management, the recommendations related to fare evasion. If you all remember those big reports on fare evasion, phase 1 and phase 2, and presto. So they were the areas where there was high priority recommendations that my team went out and they had to look at two things. One, whether it was implemented, and by law, I also have to report out on the benefits. We have some of the benefits, and some of the noteworthy benefits will be identified today, but there's other work we need to do on the benefit side. So the focus today is really on how well TTC has done in implementing high priority recommendations related to all of these areas. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my Assistant Auditor General Tara Anderson.
Thank you very much, Auditor General. Next slide, please. So of the total 157 outstanding recommendations from all of these reports, as of August 4, 2021, management asserted that 72 or 46% have been fully implemented, 3 as no longer relevant, and 82 as work in progress. And this follow-up work focused mainly on the high priority recommendations, given the high volume of recommendations reported as fully implemented by management. Next slide, please. And so we performed follow-up work on 46 recommendations, 40 of which were high priority. And of the 46 recommendations, 39 or 85% were verified as fully implemented, 2 as no longer relevant, and 5 as still in progress, although we did observe substantial progress being made. And the remaining recommendations reported by management as fully implemented have not yet been verified by us, but we will validate them in our next follow-up report. Next slide, please. This table shows the results of our work on the 46 recommendations compared to TTC management assertions provided at March 2021. Next slide, please. And as our Auditor General mentioned, it is really the TTC that has done the heavy lifting or the hard work in implementing these audit recommendations, including many of the high priority recommendations, and they've made substantial progress on others. So we really just want to take a bit of time to highlight the noteworthy changes and results that TTC has accomplished. And we'd also like to thank the key TTC staff along the way and their teams in these areas, and to the leadership of Rick Leary, Kirsten Watson, and Josie Levita, and the whole leadership team. So this first area of procurement, materials management, and cores management, we'd like to thank Usman Sheikh, Sandeep Kumar, and their teams. There were many high priority recommendations in this area with a high potential for cost savings attached. And TTC has realized over $2 million in net savings in 2020 from aftermarket parts warranty and alternate source parts, and estimates another $2.5 million annual savings by the end of 2021. As our Auditor General mentioned, we also noted a positive cultural change during our review, with departments working closely together to improve these areas. And TTC also improved the retrieval and tracking of cores by implementing a core tracking application. And this new app allows TTC to track the core components by location, document the reasons for any missing or lost core components, and enables materials management to review and investigate. Next slide, please. The next area is bus maintenance, and thank you to Alan Pritchard, Rich Wong, and their team. This is another area where the TTC has made significant progress, fully implementing almost all of the 2014 recommendations and many of those from 2015. TTC has significantly reduced its internal rebuild of parts from 1,000 in 2013 to 43 currently, and started outsourcing the parts from external vendors as it's less expensive. The impact of implementing these recommendations is still being worked on together with management, but we do expect there will be some service efficiencies and potential cost avoidance or savings from the actions taken by TTC. Next is the area of telecommunications, so thank you to Amberina Zhang and her team. TTC also achieved cost avoidance in this area, particularly with the conversion of its planned 4,600 traditional landlines to VoIP, and also by leveraging the city's agreement with its wireless vendor to obtain lower rates on TTC's wireless services. The next area is Wheeltrans, and thank you to Dwayne Geddes and his team. This is another area where TTC undertook significant work, integrating Wheeltrans customers into the accessible conventional transit system by creating a family of services network and by identifying and addressing potential safety and service issues that can present barriers to Wheeltrans customers in using the accessible conventional transit system. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, it negatively impacted ridership levels. However, we do expect there will be cost avoidance when ridership levels resume. Next slide, please. For the area of employee overtime and absenteeism, the CEO's prioritization of this area, together with TTC's implementation of Wave 1 of the new SAP system, has helped staff to more closely monitor this area on a continuous basis. TTC has seen a reduction in overtime as a result, and TTC staff are still working to identify how much can be attributed to management's actions versus other factors, and we'll continue to work together with management on this. The final noteworthy area is the expected recovery from Metrolinx of some of TTC's revenue loss that arose from functionality issues with Presto Fare equipment. And a thank you to Rick Leary, Josie Levita, and Alex Cesar and their teams for these areas in particular. Next slide, please. As mentioned, COVID-19 and resulting reduced ridership has delayed some areas such as Wheeltrans and TTC revenue operations or fare evasion from realizing the full cost avoidance and savings that is expected. And also, as noted, the impact of implementing some of these recommendations is still being determined together with TTC staff. We are aiming to include related cost avoidance savings in a future follow-up report. Next slide, please, and over to our Auditor General. Auditor General, you're on mute.
My apologies. We will continue to monitor as we move forward. It just was important that we took this time to recognize that there's been a lot of great work done. It was a focus for TTC, and it's important to recognize that. It takes, identifying the areas and providing the roadmap. It takes management implementing, but it also takes the support and the tracking of the board and of the audit committee, and all of that's worked effectively. For next steps, we will be coming out with our plan in the fall for TTC of some new audit areas. We will be tracking any areas of potential cost avoidance from these recommendations. But I just want to sincerely thank my team, thank TTC's team, and congratulate on the great work that's been done so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. And we do have a question for you from Commissioner Carroll.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Hi, Beverly. A long time no see.
Yeah,
good to
true.
see your tile. I was interested, back when you reported and you suggested that for non-revenue vehicles that we maybe set up an accounting system that would have them be charged back, a chargeback system, so that I like a chargeback system because both the user of the vehicle is now watching the costs of the maintenance of that vehicle and has to question the shop, and they have to answer back for the amount they're spending on the vehicle. I like a chargeback system. But we got a report back here saying that it's no longer relevant. Are you satisfied with the management response? Are you okay with the fact that they don't want to do that?
I know that my team has looked at that in depth. What happens when something is no longer relevant is that we take a real look at it to see if it's practical based on the situation. So I'm answering at a very high level here, Commissioner. Right. So we audit that to make sure that we're satisfied. I don't have the details in front of me. I can report back to the board on that, but I'm just going to turn it over to my Assistant Auditor General to see if she has the details right there for that recommendation.
So management stated that it was not feasible. So if Kirsten Watson is available to answer that question, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Excuse me, Rich Wong, if you would. This is Rick, through you, Chair. Rich Wong, could you answer that question, please?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Through the chair. So we deemed it not feasible. Basically, it's an accounting process where we'd have to be going back on an ongoing basis to all the stakeholders, which is quite a lot of effort with the processes that we have in place at the moment. We are coming up with a new process to make sure that each user group is aware of the usage of the vehicles, and this ties into a couple of other recommendations where we're trying to get out an annual scorecard for each vehicle and each user group. The scorecard will highlight their usage during the year. Hopefully, it will also highlight the operating costs that are being incurred to maintain these vehicles and any anomalies that we're seeing through the life cycle of each asset. So We're going to hold
Right.
the stakeholders accountable that way. Instead of trying to go back and charge individual cost centers the maintenance costs on a month-to-month basis.
Okay. So it sort of couples now with the recommendation that is complete, where you're also looking at whether or not the vehicle's even needed for that non-revenue position.
Correct. There's several objectives to this this report card. One, to identify over and underutilized vehicles. Who has them? Is there opportunities to divert those underutilized vehicles to other areas that are overutilizing vehicles? And it's a better management system, I think. And you know, potentially, and I'm just saying potentially, it might identify areas where, you know, we shouldn't be buying more vehicles. You know, we can redivert some underutilized vehicles to another area without having to come back to the budget and try and buy more of those vehicles. It may also identify areas that we don't have a big enough spare ratio for, and you know what, we're not doing proper maintenance for that. So there are some specialty vehicles that you know, you just can't buy off the shelf, and maybe we don't have enough of them, right? And for some of these large projects, and we might have to look at that as well. So that's the purpose of this annual report.
Okay, thank you. And then if I could go back to Madam Auditor General. So even if the management response is that we've done something else, and so your recommendation is no longer relevant, you go back and check to see if you agree.
100%, thank you. Yes, we do. And you will find also there is times when management has asserted something was done. We go in and we actually re-audit to make sure that it is done. And if it's not, we make sure that we identify it's still open. So we do that in-depth work. So we satisfy ourselves that if it's no longer relevant, that we're satisfied that that's a reasonable situation at this period of time. And if management asserts something's done, we verify, yes, it has been done, or else we keep it open. And so it's a real dive in each of these areas. So I didn't have the details before me, but I can say that my team has gone in and verified that it seems reasonable at this time.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Okay, so let's move to speakers. I just wondered if our Chair of Audit and Risk Management, Commissioner Lalonde, would like to speak on this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would. I just wanted to say that the Audit Risk Committee met last week and we reviewed this presentation with the Auditor General. We found it very encouraging, actually, that the TTC has been doing as well as they have in responding to the Auditor General's recommendations. And we passed a motion to refer it to the full board for review. So I would be happy at the appropriate time to move the adoption of this item.
Okay, that will be your job today. Thank you. Any other comments? I would just like to say bravo to all those involved. This is a great update, and I'm so grateful that the Auditor General doesn't let things fall into gray zones. She's so meticulous and thorough in following up, which really keeps everybody's focus. And we're very grateful and appreciative of you as our Auditor General and your entire team for your hard work, because it's very obvious how hard you work and how committed you are. So thank you from all of us to you for this work and this commitment. And we know that if you're giving this a thumbs up, we must be doing very well, because your scrutiny is, I could say many things, but you're tough. So we feel pretty good about this, I have to say. We've been celebrating these last few days, and the audit committee as well had nothing but great things to say, led by Commissioner Lalonde. So thank you so much, and thank you to the TTC staff that are working so collaboratively with your team, Tara and our AG, and the entire AG team. So great news, and let's keep up the great work. This is a great road forward. On that note, I'll ask the I'll ask the chair of the audit committee to move this item.
So moved.
All in favor? Opposed? That carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have
Thank
a
you
lovely
also
day.
for
Thank
your
you very
time.
much.
Yeah, thank you for
And
your
thanks
time
to-
this
it's a
morning. We
team
know how
effort.
busy you are.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye. It's a team effort.
Our next item, now we are actually going to finally get back to our CEO and his report. So over to Rick Leary.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, Chair Robinson. Good morning, everyone. I just want to welcome back our YouTube viewers as well as today's participants to today's board meeting. I will mention up front, thank you, Chair, for mentioning the letters that you and I will be signing and sending to other levels of government. I'm going to use the term that you've heard me use before. As an organization, we're trying to work smarter, not harder. We talk about being an efficient and effective organization and being good stewards of public fundings. The challenge we have now is we need additional funding, and I let you know that would prefer it was long-term assisted funding as well. So thank you for that. Commissioners, I'm going to also repeat a little bit of what the chair had mentioned earlier. As you know, on September 1st, we celebrated the TTC's 100th anniversary. And we marked the centenary with an event at Roncesvalles Car House Yard. And I'm going to let you know that it was a scaled back, and it was a very tasteful event, and it was COVID-19 compliant. And I'll also say it was really nice to see many of you there in person. Now, with Mayor Tory, Chair Robinson, and a small contingent of invited guests, we paid tribute to the TTC employees, past and present, for their hard work, tireless dedication to delivering a safe and reliable, efficient transit system service to 32 billion customers and counting. It was great to see the Toronto sign at Nathan Phillips Square and the CN Tower glow in TTC red in recognition of our service to customers and citizens across this great city and beyond. We've been in service business for 100 years. It's really amazing, incredible achievement. And we're going to continue, as the chair said, to mark this centenary in the following year ahead. And so we'll have more, and we'll make you aware of it as we go forward. Now, as you also may recall from previous board meetings, we had anticipated that this would be one of our busiest months since March of 2020. And in anticipation of the return of in-person classes at Toronto schools, we increased and improved services across the network. And we took some key steps, and I'd like to go through those for you. You know, we increased service system-wide. We added 25% more trains on Line 1 and Line 2 on the weekdays at peak times. We deployed an additional 180 special school trips to manage the anticipated high school students' ridership, and we communicated with school boards to determine hotspots, student volumes, as well as start and dismissal times. We increased and we restored service on nearly 30 bus routes that serve post-secondary institutions and other major corridors. And finally, we restored service on nearly all of the 900 series express routes, with more scheduled in October. You know, and I always say, most importantly, what we continue to do is maintain our service flexibility by operating a demand response bus service and putting the service where it's needed most. I'll also remind those of the safety protocols that we have in place, because I think that's important. Remind everyone that we have made masks mandatory on the TTC. We've enhanced our cleaning and disinfecting, and it's ongoing, and we'll make adjustments as needed. The vehicle fleets are being equipped with a higher grade air filter system. We call it MERV 13, and that's what you may have heard before. We continue to support vaccination clinics at subway stations in partnership with hospitals and health providers. And more recently, we announced a new policy making full vaccination mandatory for all TTC employees, contractors, and students by October 30th. This policy is the right thing to do to protect our employees and to show our customers that we're taking all steps that we can to make them feel comfortable on the TTC. Now, having said that, I would let you know that Public Health Ontario has recently revised their guidelines for disinfecting and as it relates to the surface transmission of COVID-19. So as a result, given the changes in ridership and the need to keep more vehicles in service, keep as many as possible, we're changing the number of times that the vehicles we disinfected daily to once a day in a phased approach with buses and streetcars. And this change will take place on October 1st. Now, Commissioners, on the subject of back to school, hundreds of school kids went back to class this week sporting new backpacks thanks to donations from incredibly generous TTC employees. For the second consecutive year, volunteers gave their time and effort to support the Toronto and Region chapter of Conference of Minority Transit Officials, COMTO, with a backpack and fundraising drive. Through the month of August, staff donated more than 1,000 new backpacks filled with school supplies for children and youth in the Jane Finch, Rexdale, and Melbourne communities. The backpacks were distributed through the community centers and directly to students and families in time for the new school year. You know, I had a chance to participate in the distribution of some of these backpacks, and I can tell you the smiles on these kids' face were absolutely incredible, especially when they realized it was filled with pencils and pens and erasers and paper and crayons. They were just, I've never seen kids so happy in their life. It was wonderful. And I'm so thrilled we're making a difference here in this organization. I'd also like to mention that what happened this summer is the TTC Special Constables and Fare Inspectors teamed up with Toronto Police 53 Division on Project Breezy, which collected bicycles for families in the Thorncliffe Park area. Our employees and pensioners as well donated more than 50 bikes to the cause. I'd let you know that TTC participated, donating 90 cartons of disinfectant wipes, 10,000 adult masks, and 8,000 child masks. And I just can't say enough about those that contributed their time and efforts to both of these drives. It was amazing. You know what? I'll move on to, you know, as the city and the province continues to reopen, we're anticipating more and more customers will return to the TTC. And part of our readiness and recovery plan, later this month, we're going to be launching a new Welcome Back campaign. And through a marketing efforts, we're going to be showcasing the many places, great places, I would say, in the city that people can visit by taking the TTC, and that is beyond just going to their workplace. We want to remind customers who've been away during the pandemic that the TTC is a safe way and the better way to get to all the great venues and attractions that the city has to offer. Similar to the safety campaign, Welcome Back will be appearing on our transit vehicles, shelters, and promoted on Spotify, as well as the various social media channels. The campaign will also be running in multiple languages, such as Chinese, Italian, Farsi, Tamil, and Spanish. The bottom line is the TTC is ready to serve our customers when they're ready to return back to us. Now, also speaking of later on at the end of this month, in our ongoing effort to attract talent and skill to the TTC, on September 28th, the Talent Management Department is hosting a virtual career forum focusing on trades and apprenticeships. The information session, which has been promoted on social media and our stations, is promoted all available positions within the TTC. I'd also let you know that we're featuring a question and answer session with current employees of what it's like to work for the TTC. Now, again, it's on the 28th. It'll be from 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening. And we actually opened the registration on September 10th. So anybody interested in going online, it's ttc.ca/trades. And I do encourage anyone interested in participating to sign up as soon as possible. You know, people want to work at the TTC. And as you recall, we've done a number of these over the last year. We had 4,000 women in an event. We had 2,000 women in April. Individuals from students in April, looking at the TTC as a possible opportunity to work. This is a place people want to be. Now, let me add here that you also will see in the CEO's report, it includes a new core metric connected with the 10-point action plan on diversity and inclusion. And we had made the commitment to hire more women into transit operations, with women representing at least 4 of every 10 new operator hires by the end of this year. And in 2021, we'll be hiring 400 operators, and at least 40% or 160 of those will be women. So we'll be able to continue to track the outcomes throughout the remainder of this year, but I'd let you know we're well on our way to achieve the minimum of 40%, as I'm reminded by staff. Now, earlier I mentioned our mandatory vaccine policy, which was released on September 7th. And this new policy makes COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory for all TTC employees, contractors, and students. Getting all TTC employees vaccinated is important for the TTC as we continue to move forward with recovery. To support our employees in getting vaccinated, we continue to hold clinics on TTC properties for our workforce, their families, as well as our customers and members of the public. This past weekend, we held a clinic at Shepherd West Station in partnership with Humber River Hospital. So I want to thank the hospital for that. And earlier this month, we held clinics at Victoria Park, Warden, and Islington stations in partnership with East Toronto Health Partners. Again, I want to thank them for all they're doing with us. But in fact, to date, we've hosted 23 pop-up vaccination clinics on TTC property and administered more than 5,000 doses. So we're really making a difference towards this fight, and there are a lot more clinics being planned, and we'll let you know as we have them scheduled. You know, I'm just, again, proud of the role that we continue to play in putting this pandemic behind us. You know, you've heard me talk before, but public transit is a people business on many levels, and the 16,000 men and women of this organization are proving that every day. Now what we're going to introduce is up next will be a presentation from Wendy Reuter as well as Angela Gibson. It's entitled TTC's Ridership Scenario Planning. So we're going to turn it over to them. And Chair, I would tell you that when the presentation is concluded, that will conclude my opening remarks and we can go right to questions. So thank you. Wendy?
Hi, Rick. I'm just going to say a couple of words to introduce this so the board has some context. Excuse me. So we're bringing you this presentation to highlight the capacity we've been building in TTC over the last year for data-rich customer analysis. It's so we can improve service planning on a board period, annual, and multi-year basis. And it allows us to do kind of annual overall business planning. Allows us to create strategy and foresight scenarios. And it's been invaluable as we've responded to the evolving stages of the pandemic. Now we're, as Rick says, we're also looking at multi-year forecasting so that we can do scenario planning and inform the decision-making of executive and the board. Angela Gibson and Wendy Reuter joined the TTC about 1 year ago, and they've led this next evolution of customer-focused service and making sure TTC is future ready. And I'm really proud to introduce their presentation to you today. Over to you, Wendy.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. Chrisanne, maybe if you could go to the first slide, please. So good morning. This is a snapshot of the key messages that we're going to be sharing with you this morning. And then we're going to dive into some of the insights that are informing our 5-year service plan reset. The first is, this is really focused on post-pandemic. The demand scenarios that you'll see are based on the expectation that Canadians, Torontonians are going to feel free to move around safely in early 22. The other is that transportation choices are really a function of people's lives. We can plan for their needs and influence their choice, but we can't change their need. We really need to understand what their needs are. And to do this, we need new sources of information. We need to leave no stone unturned in terms of not only looking at prior trends and information sources, but also a view to the future and what information can help us understand the future needs of our customers as well. What you'll see is that in all of this, work from home is currently the biggest variable in our return to pre-pandemic ridership levels. It's key to not only the subway use and streetcar use, but also 30 to 40% of our bus use as well. The demand scenarios that you'll see suggest that pessimistically, we're looking at 67% to optimistically 93% pre-pandemic levels over the next 2 years. And essentially, supporting ridership return is not business as usual. We need new initiatives and we need new insights to understand our customers to help build back. Next slide, please, Kristen. Okay, so our customers are complex and they have many reasons to travel. We heard earlier from the post-secondary school cohort about their needs to travel and their versions of what's needed now and what will be needed in the future. We're also seeking to understand all these customer segment groups that we have, whether it's post-secondary, secondary, office workers, retail workers, manufacturing workers. These are all the types of customers trips that we're seeking to understand. And one of the key pieces that we wanted to speak about today is that 29% of TTC customer demand is office workers. That's one piece. Another is that we know the pandemic has not affected all of our customers equally. Prior to the pandemic, our mode share in Toronto was 38%. Now during the pandemic, we know that the residents of the NIAs have been hit most heavily with the pandemic. Travel into downtown core is less than 25% of what it was pre-pandemic, while the suburban areas have remained over 48% of use. A third key piece that we'd like to leave you with in terms of our understanding of why and where customers use is just the time of day and the customer profile throughout the day and when they're traveling. Prior to the pandemic, we would plan service to the peaks of AM and PM service, and we see that flattening throughout the pandemic. And remaining the demand that we're seeing at the peaks are equivalent to the demand that we're seeing throughout the rest of the service. Essentially, demand is not finding all spots of our system equally. Next slide, please, Chris-Anne. This is a waterfall graph that illustrates how our demand has fallen due to COVID and brings us to the range of about 45%, which is what we saw on Friday. Population has affected us. Telework has had the biggest impact on our ridership to date. And of course, the effect of post-secondary and secondary school models during the pandemic have an impact as well. The second largest impact is around mode share. Our mode share prior to the pandemic was about 27%, and with its decline during the pandemic, that's contributing to the decline in ridership as well. So we're seeing is ridership recovery is really dependent on recovery of the downtown core, office work, and also the return of discretionary travel. Next slide, please, Chris-Anne. This table is meant to give ourselves a ballpark understanding of what needs to happen so that ridership demand can reach new thresholds of 50%, 70%, 80%, or 90%. So for example, to reach 70% of pre-COVID demand, we need a combination of our customers to be coming back. 70% might require a combination of office occupancy getting back to 50%, full class in-learning for both secondary and post-secondary must come back in some sort of normal terms and in terms of events and gatherings. And our transit mode share would need to get back to 24%. The single biggest key unknown is around our employers and their employees and their intentions around return to office post-pandemic. Next slide, please, Chris-Anne. So to help understand this is a view to the future. We've been talking to a lot of stakeholders, seeking to understand what employers in the Toronto area have intentions are post-pandemic. And a lot of individuals, a lot of organizations are putting efforts into return to office in the Toronto area. We wanted to understand what Toronto employers were thinking post-pandemic. So we conducted this survey throughout the summer, specifically to ask that question, the post-pandemic scenario, what were employers envisioning for their work from home and office employees? We surveyed 250 employers in the Toronto area. These ranged from small organizations to those with over 10,000 employees, wide distribution across the city, ultimately to find out, to get early insights as to what their intentions were around work from home frequency after the pandemic. Next slide, please, Chris-Anne. So two key questions in this survey were really to seek to understand how they were approaching, how employers were approaching thinking about continued work from home post-pandemic. Essentially, we see that about 43% of employees have some availability to work from home prior to the pandemic. And what we heard from these same employers was that about the same portion of employees would have this ability to work from home post-pandemic as well. But where we really saw a shift was with employers' intentions around the number of days that they were expecting their employees would have flexibility to work from home. Prior to the pandemic, this averaged about a third of a day per week for those 43% of employees. These employers that we spoke to indicated that they would see that workforce expanding their work from home practices to over 3 days per week. A significant shift when we think about that complement of employees that have previously been using TTC. Further, we asked these employers whether they had long-term intentions around these practices as well, and really founded that around their intentions around their real estate. We found that nearly half of respondents said their firms were likely to consider major changes in in their office space. This included downsizing spaces or relocating. Pulling all of this to get information together are some of the insights that are leading us towards our information to help reset our 5-year service plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Angela Gibson, to walk you through our next information.
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning. Next slide, please. So taking both the approach and data sources that Wendy has just shared with you, this graph provides our demand outlook for 2022 and 2023 as of August 30th of this year. So the blue lines at the top of this graph are our ultimate high state scenarios, where at the bottom, the green lines represent the low and ultimate states. The solid lines for both the green and the blue lines assume a 1-year recovery, while the dashed lines assume a 2-year recovery. So let's start at the low end. At the low end, we would expect to start at 51% of pre-COVID demand beginning in 2022, and then see demand grow slowly to about 80% in 2023. If we look at the blue lines at the top, this is our optimistic projection, and we would see a start in 2022 at 63% of pre-COVID demand, and then ending at 93% by the end of 2022. The two most likely scenarios are the ones in the middle, where we reach about 80% of pre-COVID demand levels by the end of 2022. So whether or not demand continues to grow into 2023 is dependent on a number of factors, including us getting transit mode share back to pre-pandemic levels, a speedy economic recovery, and then increasing office occupancy from 60 to 80% of pre-pandemic levels. We know we're an organization with long-term planning horizons. Therefore, it's really important for us that we continue to do research and work with academic institutions on developing scenarios to understand where we fall within that yellow band that you can see there in the middle of the graph. Everything today we've presented to you is really here about total ridership. So we are looking at the profile of our ridership demand to understand the impact of flattening of the AM and the PM peak on our service levels. Next slide, please. In 2020 and in 2021, we saw our entire transportation network be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Because of this, we are taking the opportunity, as was mentioned by Wendy, to reset the 5-year service plan, which is our blueprint for service needs. This isn't business as usual for us. And what we've presented to you today gets us to 81 to 95% of pre-COVID demand. So the 5-year service plan reset will include an enhanced focus on some of the actions that we've already identified in the plan and develop new actions that's aimed at recovery. The things on the left of this slide show you what is in our control. For example, we're working with the city on queue jump lanes and the work that we've done already with rapid TO with our BRTs. The things on the right are the things that other jurisdictions are using to really push people out of cars. So what we've shared with you today demonstrates that in this COVID pandemic crisis, we are using various different data sources and partnerships to understand more about the dynamic needs of our customers and the potential impact to our future service delivery. In the coming months, we'll be back to you with more reports that really address service integration and fair policy that help address the challenges that we've presented to you today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation as well. Any questions for, okay, Vice Chair, you're up first.
Thank you, Chair. And let me start by congratulating the team for their data project. I'm a big believer in more data and really understanding helps us understand what's going on. But I have it's both a question and a comment, I guess, and it was really twigged by the presentation we heard this morning from the students. Having specific data around, and using it to make arguments and to illustrate issues. So the question I have is, are we able to precisely collect data that shows how many of our riders are in fact joining from outside the city and the suburbs? Do we have those data points? Can we get those data points?
I'll just jump in to say we use a number of different ones. We use Presto data, which is not always proved to be reliable. It shows that about 11% of the people traveling on the TTC system are originating in the 905, originating or leaving, in the beginning of day. And then we also have, anyway, we use many different data sources to try to vector in and create that picture for us about where people's origins and destinations are. And the student move TO data today, we're going to be reaching out to get that to add, yet another lens to it. Wendy, I don't know if you want to answer it as well.
Thanks, Kathleen. No, those are key data sources, certainly. Presto data helps us understand customer travel trips across some of those borders. And as Kathleen mentioned, about 11% are coming from the 905 areas, either through GO or the surrounding suburban systems or driving in. And finding new sources of information like Student Move TO proposed today, and leveraging those partners to provide insights into customer segments and their future views and of what their needs will be immensely helpful too.
Well, and the other interesting data point you presented this morning, Wendy, is the fact that post-COVID, employers will be comfortable with people working from home 3 days a week. So what we have been seeing in reports and data is that means that people can live further away, because if they're only commuting in a couple of days a week, it's not as bad as commuting 5 days a week. So those regional numbers, it seems to me, are likely to increase. So the reason why I think it's important, and in fact, I would recommend to Rick that in your CEO report, you actually show this piece of data, the regional, how many people are coming into the city, how many people does TTC serve? Because, Chair, I think it helps in the letter that you're going to write to the province and the feds about supporting, providing us with financial support. TTC isn't just about the city of Toronto. TTC is about the region. It's about supporting and, in fact, creating economic development across the region. So support and funding, proper funding of TTC means that the economic impact will be felt across the regions and therefore really worthy of support. So that's I know I probably should have saved the comments for later, but those are my comments and questions. Let's pay a lot more attention to the data to show that the extent to which TTC is bringing in and allowing individuals who can live in the regions to come into the city. And Chair, then you can say to the province, this is why you need to give, this isn't a charity that you're giving us, you really are. It's about economic development. So I'll stop there.
Okay, those are great comments. Thank you. The next speaker is Commissioner Min Wong, but if I could ask the Vice Chair just to take the chair for me for a few minutes, I just have to take an important call.
Okay.
Thank you.
Done. Councillor Min Wong.
Yeah, thank you. I'm kind of trying to step back to kind of figure out what to do with this data and think about, how how we should be looking at this. And I look at, you know, I see this thing that, you know, this undertone within the presentation that we need to get ridership levels up, but I kind of wonder about that because pre-COVID, you know, we were complaining that the buses were overcrowded during rush hour. There was all sorts of delays, and you know that the system was being overtaxed, and we needed more buses, etc. Okay, and now, strangely enough, our wish came true. Right? So we have fewer people on the transit system, and more people working at home. But I don't see sort of any type of celebration here that in fact less people are going downtown, which from a, you know, a values point of view, you know, if more people are working from home and not using our roads, I mean, that should, you know, at a certain level be a good thing. That we're flattening out and people are going at different times of day and not crushing the system in the morning and morning and evening peak periods. I thought that's what we wanted, and all of a sudden we've gotten it and we don't want it. I mean, that's kind of the undertone of what I'm getting. And so this idea that fewer people using it, I mean, maybe you're taking this from a revenue point of view that it's a good thing, but I mean, at a different level, it means that maybe you're going to get a seat on that bus during rush hour, and then you're not going to be waiting as long. So I'm wondering maybe, you know, how does the CEO, you know, look at this as potentially a good thing?
Through you, Madam Chair. You know, as we've been reporting out on during the CEO reports and when we give special presentations on the impacts of service, we don't have a rush hour. We have a baby hump right now when it comes to rush hour. But as they just laid out in the presentation, we know that we had to put, as we were projecting, where was the ridership going to grow, right? We've had weekends and off-peak for the last 18 months. Now we know with schools going back and post-secondaries and in accommodation for even the people going to return. So now we're very subtly putting the service back in during the rush hours so that we don't permit the overcrowding and try to stay ahead of that. But there will be a point in time, right, that and what that time is going to be, we're still trying to determine, where there will be buses and streetcars and trains with a significant amount of ridership on them.
Do we like people working from home?
I would tell you that running the transit system and not having ridership on there and the negative impact on revenue, that it's putting quite a pressure on us. So I'm welcoming people coming back and using us whenever they possibly can.
Is this a case of be afraid of what you ask for? Because you might actually get it, because we got it.
Sir, is it all right to take that as a rhetorical question?
Sure.
Well, you know what, we may have to reimagine what transit looks like and
Yeah,
have a different kind of discussion about how we fund it if we have fewer. We still need it. You know, you still need.
If they're going in cars, that's one thing, Madam Chair. But if they're staying home as a value, you know, that's you know, that's something that we've always aspired to. People not, you know, burning as much fossil fuels and not being a drag on the system. Anyway, that's more of a speech than anything else. I'm finished.
Thank you. Next is Commissioner Carroll, and then I have Ron Lalonde, and then I see, whose hand did I see? Fenton. So that's how we're going. So Commissioner Carroll.
Sorry, Madam Vice Chair, I'm confused by Commissioner Minnan-Wong's last comment there. Are we in questions or speaking to this presentation?
We're in questions at this point. So.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to speak to the presentation. I don't have any more questions other than, is this presentation going to be attached to the agenda at some point so that it's on the website for us in the obvious location?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd let you know it's being posted now, Commissioner.
Oh, okay. And one more procedural question. We speak to this, we'll still be able to go back and speak to the CEO's report writ large.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
thank you. I'll go on the speaker's list. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Lalonde, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Yeah, one question of staff, and that relates to the financial implications of this ridership forecast. The chair has indicated that she intends to write a letter concerning funding related to the impact of COVID. It would seem to me that it'd be very helpful to analyze what the financial impact of these ridership forecasts would be, and include that in the forecast of need that the chair is going to be writing about. So the question is, can we do that financial analysis of the revenue impact of these forecasts and include that in the work being done by the chair?
So through the chair, for 2021, it is in the report that we had before you. Today on the financial update, we're still shy of budgeted funding, although our underspending has helped mitigate some of that. So that was in report number 14. In terms of going forward, clearly, when we look at the service demand forecast, that translates into a lower number of actually paid revenue rides, because it's a linked journey, and so the calculation there is a little bit different, and the impact that that has on revenue, of course, if you think about it in pre-COVID terms, we used to get about $1.2 billion per year in revenue, and so roughly 10% is about $125 million loss. So to the extent that we are below 100%, and the extent to which our recovery has continued, we can bank on about 125 million for every 10% below 100% going forward.
Thank you. Just to follow up, that's an excellent kind of estimate of what the impact is. I think it'd be useful to actually crunch the numbers and actually calculate both the higher range and the lower range impact through 2022 and 2023 to get some sense of the issue that we're facing over a longer period of time and the magnitude of that.
Yeah.
I don't expect you to have those numbers on the top of your head, but I think it would be helpful to do that analysis and report it back to the board.
So through the chair, we are in that work in preparing the 22 budget submission, as well as the 23 outlook. So that work is underway. We have some preliminary estimates, and we are waiting to see kind of the impact of actually this month's return to see whether any adjustments need to be made. But that work is underway, just so the board knows that is happening.
That's great. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Jagdeo, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Folks, thank you so much for that presentation. I feel like foresight analysis is one of those underappreciated elements of driving good strategic projects, good strategic management, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we include some of this in the next strategic corporate plan that we build out for the next 5 years. I have two questions. The first question is around this work in particular. Is there a world where we actually take this a step further and actually start narrating what scenarios will look like, so that we can start to frame some of our policies as well as some of the initiatives that we implement over the next several years? Like, are we taking that data further and actually like coming up with these realities for us to consider on our path?
That usually is the next step with scenario planning, and it gives me an opportunity, and Angela, you can finish the thought for me, just to say that this is an ongoing activity because it is so dynamic and unpredictable, and even employers that we interviewed in July might be modifying their own thinking. So Wendy is always out in the market, speaking to our stakeholders, our customers, all the people that you saw. And yes, I think creating that narrative around it, especially as we see, how affordable housing is going to be unfolding. And are we going to be putting more affordable rental housing, please, near transit stations? And will that begin to change the picture of who's using transit and when? I don't know if you want to fill that in, Angela.
Yeah, I would agree on that. I think the actual framework for the next 5-year service plan reset will be framed around these various different scenarios. And obviously the pandemic has accelerated that kind of thinking because we didn't think we would be in this kind of situation. And we need to build that kind of resiliency so we have alternatives to be able to pivot towards in the future. So yes, that's the kind of thinking that will be embedded in that next strategy.
Got it. My second question is to management in general. So, whoever wants to jump into this can. But just going off of Commissioner Lalonde's point, I think it's important as we write this letter for additional funding to obviously think about what the financial implications are going to be as we see some pressures coming from the pandemic. But how do we tell the story even further when we think about, the capital that we might need or the revenue shortfall? What does that mean for the other variables that the TTC impacts? Right? Because I think that we forget that the TTC and transit by extension is such an important lever for building cities. It has an impact on everything down to, the average civilian being late to their job and how that impacts their own personal income statement. So everything from, service to the individual person to, potentially safety, greenhouse gases, etc. Are we able to like cascade that and say, yeah, look, we might need $12 billion or 12 million or $120 million, whatever the value is. But here's what it means to the actual consumer. Here's what it means to the individual life. Here's what it means to Toronto as a city that's trying to continuously build, and what that means if we don't get funding for transit, which I think helps tell an even more impressive narrative, and one that hopefully will, strike fear into our federal partners and be accretive to us. So I don't know if there's any thinking around that. And it is a stretch to try and extrapolate that, but just curious to know if we can include something like that.
Kathleen, you want to handle that?
Felt like it was fairly wide ranging. I know this relates to the CD How work that we were talking about. We're still doing a lot of assembling, and actually I've been lucky enough that some commissioners call me from time to time with questions, and so perhaps we could set up a conversation with you, Commissioner, to get some of your thoughts. I know that your strength is in scenario and strategic planning and thinking, and so anything we can do to make our arguments more robust and our insights deeper would be fantastic. Sorry, it's kind of a lame answer.
No, that's completely okay, and I would love to get involved and sit at the table to help do that if that's an area that you're willing to entertain. So thank you.
Excellent. Okay, well, shall we go to comments on this piece, and then we can come back to questions on the CEO report? Any further comments on this data piece? What I don't see any hands up, but the notes I've made is that from Commissioner Lalonde is the comment that the revenue impact of the forecast and the letter that the chair may write. I noted that we should, if we can point to the regional riders we serve, it illustrates that there's broader impact here. And then, of course, the broader question that Commissioner Jagdale raised, which may be alluded to in the letter, but can be explained further later on. So those were the comments I heard. Anything else that anybody wants to add? Commissioner Carroll?
Are we into timed speakers now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to, I wasn't going to speak to this. It's a very thorough presentation, but I just wanted to comment because of Commissioner Deputy Mayor Minnan Wong's comments. I think there are a number of ways to look at the phenomenon we're seeing right now. And if we really think about it, I'm sitting in City Hall today. I'm coming down to work probably 3 days a week. And what is fascinating to me is that this building is almost empty, and yet I'm sitting in traffic, really intense traffic to get here. And what that says to me is we have some reimagining to do. We need to reimagine our ridership growth strategy, but we always need to have one. And even in this unique circumstance, we need one. Guilty as charged, I drove to get here. Raced over and took a grandson who missed the bus to school and then drove down here. So I was driving around the city. But I think we've got to look at what's happening right now. If I am only coming to work 2 or 3 times a week, have I abandoned the transit system altogether? Because I'm only getting my car a few times, and I'm not buying a pass to commute 5 days a week. So now that I haven't bought that pass, it's easier to say, nah, I'm going to Uber today. or I'm back at work and I'm coming downtown, but I don't like those case numbers, so I'm back in my car, or I'm back in an Uber to avoid sitting with a crowd. I'll just take my chances with this one driver. There are all sorts of pandemic scenarios in which people are making conscious choices to avoid transit still. And some of the CEO's remarks that we need to welcome people back to transit. I think we need to not just welcome them back, but we're going to have to strategically rethink our ridership growth strategy to match that WFH. How do we make people put transit back in their lifestyle, even though their lifestyle has changed? We have to do that because, you know, be careful what you wish for. We were never really wishing to drop ridership. As crowded as it was, what we were wishing for was more vehicles to accommodate it. But this is this commission, this corporation is addicted to growth. And it's an ironic kind of growth. We need more growth because we need more ridership, we need more revenue. But every time we get a new ride, we also have a new cost because we don't run on cost recovery. So we churn. We're addicted to growth, but also addicted to the relationship with our partners to deliver it. And if we move into a societal lifestyle change that does not include transit, and yet a subset needs us to continue to deliver it, and our provincial government continues to expand it, that is a recipe for disaster. And so I don't think we should celebrate the fact that, yay, one or two buses are less crowded because some people are staying home. We need to figure out how we use this as a reset moment, but still turn it around to our end game is to literally not just welcome people back, but cause them to make a mode change and get on mass transit and reduce the number of times we're using fossil fuels for an individual trip. That's our goal. We are a major part of this city and this nation's climate change goals. So we can't abandon that goal. We simply have to reimagine how we achieve it in this new world of work. That's my rant. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and I see the chair has returned.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, we're into, I think we were going to move back into any questions on the CEO report, as we spent the last bit of time really discussing the data report. So we're into questions on the CEO report. So I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else with questions or comments? I don't see anybody, so I'd ask for a request request a motion to receive the CEO's report and presentation. And that's Commissioner Carroll. All those in favor, opposed, that carries. Thank you to the CEO and to Angela, Wendy, everybody for their presentation today. Lots of detailed information. We're now going to move to item 5, which is the Line 3 bus replacement study update. And we do have a presentation from staff, so I would pass it over to Kathleen to start the presentation, introduce it.
Chair?
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, just one moment. The ACAT minutes are next.
Sorry, I missed that. My apologies. Okay, so we're now calling on Igor to come forward to present the ACAT minutes, please.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you, Chair Robinson and Vice Chair De Laurentiis. Good morning, commissioners, and soon to be good afternoon. Before I begin, I want to thank Chair Robinson and Rick Leary for hosting all of us for the 100th anniversary of the TTC on September 1st. It was a wonderful event and a great opportunity to see people for the first time in many months. I had the great privilege of chatting with TTC staff and some that have been around for over 5 decades. It was incredibly humbling to hear so many staff talk about ACAT and the impact we have made over the years. So I just want to thank everyone who was involved in this event and echo the comments that were made before me in making this happen. My first item is in regards to ACAT recruitment, which is well underway for this year. To all those interested, the application will close on September 21st, 2021. You can find more information on the TTC website. ttc.ca/ACAT_apply. For those that require assistance with the application process, there are many ways to apply and seek out support in doing so. We welcome the support from all commissioners in this endeavor. We hope where possible you can aid in amplifying this information, especially on social media and any networks that you may have or folks that you think would be interested in this opportunity. My second item is the TTC's Forum on Accessible Transit, which will be taking place on October 21st, 2021. I believe that's correct. Once the TTC is ready with our promotion campaign, we once again appreciate the support from commissioners in driving participation to this incredibly important event that engages the accessibility community and allows the public to ask questions of the TTC with respect to accessibility. And of course, we welcome all commissioners to attend if you're able to do so. Great opportunity to hear from the public. And finally, my third item that I have today that I want to speak to really sort of gets at the creative and innovative approach that the TTC is undertaking when it comes to accessibility and really taking a holistic aim to the challenges that people experience when taking transit. So the TTC is developing in partnership with Magnus Mode, a unique and exciting project to produce digital card decks to help customers with cognitive disabilities use the TTC. So Magnus Mode supports people with autism or other cognitive disabilities by digitizing step-by-step guides for various activities. For example, how to plan a trip, ride a bus, engage in personal care. And those are all my updates for today. Thank you all for your time and happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? And okay, any speakers on this item? Okay, Igor, thank you very much for your presentation today. I would ask for a motion to receive the ACAT minutes, and that's Commissioner Jadio. All those in favor, that is carried. Now, Kathleen, my apologies, our Chief Strategy and Customer Officer, you are up now to introduce the presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is an interim report to the board asking for confirmation that the planning that we've done to date in collaboration with community and stakeholders fully canvasses all the options for us to replace the SRT service and all of the ways we could do it, either using the existing right-of-way or using streets. And so Mr. Heskell and his colleague are going to do that presentation for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen, and good morning or good afternoon. We'll go quickly through this presentation, which, as Kathleen says, outlines the current planning process, where we're at, what we're asking the board to approve, and what our next steps will be. The next slide, please. I think the background is fairly well known. Back in February, the board approved the closure of train service on Line 3 in 2023 and its replacement with a bus service that would have to operate until 2030 or so, when the Line 2 extension, which is being built by the province, opens. That is the important task that is in front of us now, is planning as good a bus service as we can deliver. We want to provide an excellent way of moving people in lieu of the trains, and we've started out on that process. We've essentially had one round of public consultation, and we're now going back to the board with some confirmations, and then we'll start a second round of public consultation after that. Next slide, please. The Line 3 is an integral part of the transit network, both in Toronto and in Scarborough. It's been running since 1985. It's quite notable in that the majority of the people who ride on Line 3 connect to and from Line 2, and also a very high percentage of people who ride on Line 3 connect to or from existing TTC bus services. Scarborough Centre and Kennedy are by far the two busiest stations on the route, and fully half the rides that are made on Line 3 trains are made by people who connect to or from buses at Scarborough Centre Station. That connection is made by going two levels, from the ground level bus platform up to mezzanine level, and then up to the train platform level, one level above that. And so it's a relatively inconvenient transfer between buses and trains. Next slide, please. In the February report, we pointed to one indicative way of replacing the train service by essentially extending all major bus routes that come into Scarborough Centre down to Kennedy Station as express buses, The benefit of this would be that it would carry people on the same way they do today, but then they would save a transfer. So they would be on the bus that comes into Scarborough Centre Station, and then instead of getting off and transferring to another bus, for example, they would just stay on the bus. The bus would run express, would stop at a few places, and would then end up back down at Kennedy. This is a good way to move people because it essentially improves upon the transit trip that they have today. In order to provide sufficient capacity to replace the trains and to carry all the people that want to move that way, the buses would have to run about every minute. And that's necessary in order to have enough service to actually move everybody who wants to move there. The routing the buses take doesn't really matter. They could go many different ways, and we'll get into that in a second. The other thing we want to do is think about other ways of moving people. This is essentially a reimaging of the bus network in Scarborough in the absence of those Line 3 trains. And so are there other ways of changing the bus routes around? Are there ways of striking a deal with Metrolinx so that customers could ride on the GO trains for a TTC fare, for example, at any number of Stouffville Line or Lakeshore East Line stations? So these are all options we want to look at. We want to cast a very wide net when it comes to service options. Next slide, please. The other obvious way to run buses is not to extend them, but rather to run a dedicated shuttle bus just between Scarborough Centre and Kennedy Station. This is what we do today when we have unplanned or planned short-term closures of the Line 3 trains. The benefits of this is that it could be more reliable. It potentially could run with a dedicated fleet of vehicles. The other option could as well, but it would require a lot more vehicles to do that. The routing could be the same or could be different than the first option. That is quite variable. The frequency would have to be the same, and we'd still look at a reimaging of the transit network in Scarborough as part of this. Next slide, please. So we cast a wide net when we looked at corridor options. These are the corridor options that we've identified as the likely places that buses could run. Effectively, they're every option possible out there between the two locations. And this is what we took out to stakeholders and to the public as sort of a first cut at where could the buses run and how could they run. Essentially, it's 5 routes on streets and it's 1 route on the Line 3 right away. And we're looking at all of these. We have a couple of sub options, including options on the street that avoid the subway construction on Eglinton Avenue, just east of Kennedy Station, which is shown at the bottom of this drawing in the black hashed area. So this is the wide net of options we put out there that we're looking at. Next slide, please. One of the leading options is, and one of the very popular ones, is convert Line 3, convert that right away so that it can be run with buses. So instead of trains running up and down the right of way, we turn it into essentially a busway, a big concrete wide pad of 2 lanes that buses could run up and down, and people could get on and off those buses. The clear benefit of this is that it's separate from road traffic, or largely separate from road traffic, and therefore the service would be more reliable, it would be faster, and it potentially would require fewer resources to actually operate it. It would also continue service to locations like Lawrence East Station and Ellesmere Station, where people use now, and so it has a minimal effect on their travel patterns. And there's also obviously less disruption to surrounding neighborhoods because we wouldn't have that 1-minute bus service operating north-south on the major streets. In fact, one of the leading candidates here is to not use the entire Line 3 right away, but rather to follow that dotted line that you see on Bellamy and on Brimley and on Ellesmere, and then join the Line 3 right away at Ellesmere Station, making use of the existing roadways as part of the overpass there, traveling then south, serving a stop at the Lawrence East Station site, where we would also have driveways for buses to get on and off the busway there, and then continuing on down to Kennedy Station. And so that's an option, which is to use just the north-south portion, which is at grade, and that avoids the difficult challenges of using the elevated portion, which runs east-west, which would be difficult but possible to fit buses into, but would also require buses to operate as far east as McCowan Station in order to gain that right away. Next page, please. And then there's the on-street options. And so we are looking at all of these because we need to be comprehensive. And so we're looking at what routing would be the best way to run buses. It doesn't have to be the same street in every direction. All the routes don't have to go on the same street. They could run on different streets. They would need to stop at various locations. So we'd at a minimum have a stop at Ellesmere and at Lawrence, and we'd look at stops at other locations. And we've heard suggestions from customers on that. And most importantly, we need to look at transit priority on these corridors. So working with our partners at the city, we will be identifying and doing some technical work into what degree of transit priority is necessary in order to move our customers as good as we can on an on-street option like this. Now, that transit priority could run the whole gamut from transit signal priority to queue jump lanes, which improve the operations at major intersections, to the full red paint treatment that we've seen on the Rapid TO network on Eglinton, Kingston Road, and Morningside. So they're all on the table, and we'll be looking at that, working with the city to figure out, in a way that's consistent with their Rapid TO work, how best to introduce transit priority to improve the travel times. The other important point is that if we do choose the convert the line 3 right of way to a busway option, we will have to run on the streets for a period of time. And that period of time could be up to 2 years while the conversion of the busway happens. And so we would have to then also do some transit priority in order to make sure that these services run well. The other thing that's common to both options is we need to expand our bus terminal capacities at both Scarborough Centre Station and Kennedy Station because of the vastly increased frequency and number of buses. At Scarborough Centre, that's relatively straightforward. There's space that's currently leased to Metrolinx, which we could take back and use for the replacement service. At Kennedy, we would have to build a larger temporary bus terminal. And so there's early works going on to deal with all the complicated interdependencies at Kennedy on that. Next page, please. This is an example of travel time changes. We show this in the February report as well. The top bar gives essentially an estimate of how long it would take a typical trip from Malvern Town Centre on the 133 Nielsen, then transferring at Scarborough Centre, assuming about 5 minutes for that transfer and for the wait for the train, and then a 10-minute ride on the train to Kennedy. That's today's service, which takes about 40 minutes for that trip. Under the option of extending existing bus routes, an example would be the same 25 minutes on the Nielsen bus. You would then save that transfer at Scarborough Centre. The bus would then run express to Kennedy, but of course the travel time would be longer than the train, and there would be variability. And that variability can be dealt with by transit priority or by running on the line 3 right of way. Our goal is, of course, to reduce that variability so that the travel time impact on customers is as small as possible. Next slide, please. So Eric will now take you through the rest of this presentation, which will then talk about the evaluation framework, the items that we're putting to the board for approval today, and our next steps. Eric?
Thanks, Scott. To help us evaluate and assess the alternatives and options that Scott just talked about, we've proposed evaluation criteria to assess benefits and trade-offs. We've refined the proposed criteria here with feedback from customers, which is important so that we make sure that we evaluate the alternatives with a lens that is consistent with what customers also find important. And so this means evaluating the options through criteria like customer experience, neighborhood and community impact, ease of implementation, impacts on urban structure and built form, equity, costs, and network compatibility. One last element of this study is on the adaptive reuse of Line 3 infrastructure. At the end of our study, we will identify what parts of the existing infrastructure, if any, we would continue to need for transit operations. Any part that is not needed could become available for new uses, and we're working closely with colleagues at City Planning to study this. For something like the station buildings, possible ideas for reuse includes things like creating new community hubs or open space. And for the corridor itself, it could become something like an active transportation corridor or a linear park with green space. Public consultations is a critical part to all parts of this project, and we want to hear from as many folks as possible. There are 2 rounds of public consultations, each including things like stakeholder and public meetings, online surveys, and pop-ups. The first round was delivered this summer and focused on everything that we've covered so far in this presentation. The next round that's planned for the fall will focus on the actual routing alternatives for the bus replacement service. Stakeholders for the consultations include customers, residents, and community organizations, the board, local councilors, transit advocacy groups, and equity deserving groups. On that last group, we've been working closely with colleagues from the city's Social Development, Finance, and Administration Division to have targeted engagement with groups from equity deserving areas to get their feedback on the project. And this has included meetings with the community coordination planning tables for the North and South Scarborough clusters. And the feedback that we've received for this first phase of the project has been generally positive. On the proposed routes for the extension, the majority of the feedback supported the bus routes that we proposed to extend. Online survey responses were also consistent with the feedback that we heard at stakeholder meetings on things like having a separate express shuttle or having better integration with Go. And so these are all suggestions that we will bring forward for further analysis in the next phase of our study. On the proposed corridors, there was strong support, like Scott mentioned, for using the Line 3 right-of-way as the option to get buses between Scarborough Centre and Kennedy. Brimley and Midland were the runner-ups as the most preferred on-street options. On the proposed evaluation framework, we saw that the strong majority of customers agreed with the criteria that were proposed. More support was identified for some criteria over others, and based on the feedback that we heard, we're going to expand some of the criteria to include other important metrics that customers flag for us, like consideration for the environment and climate change. And then on adaptive reuse, we found that ideas with active transportation and new green space elements were more popular. And so this feedback will help us and our colleagues at City Planning to identify next steps for adaptive reuse in the next phase of the study. And then finally, here's a look ahead. The next major milestone for this project will be reporting back to the board in January on the final recommendations of the study. And then later in the fall of 2022, GO and intercity buses will vacate the terminal at Scarborough Centre for the platform modification work that Scott mentioned to begin. And then this will be delivered until approximately the fall of 2023. And that is when we will plan to end the train service on Line 3 and begin running buses on street. And then if the Line 3 right-of-way corridor is ultimately selected as the option to move forward with, it would be at this point that we would begin the construction on the right-of-way to convert it for bus operation. And that's by the fall of 2025. That is when we would shift the bus operation from on-street onto the right-of-way. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We have a number of questions for you. So we'll start with Commissioner Lai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation, and has answered a lot of my questions on this presentation. I'd like to thank you for that, staff. Just wanted to be clear that approving today will include all the proposed alternatives. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. We're asking the board to approve the criteria and the options that we will take to detailed evaluation.
And then it will come back to us in January 2022 for the final alternative you're taking. I assume that's correct.
That is correct. We'd ask the board in January to approve the actual option that we would pursue. Yes.
I guess. Okay, thanks. The next question would be your public consultation that the second phase in the fall. What is the timeline? Are you expecting it to be like, I see the city councilors, there's one of your stakeholders there. My office actually would very much like to participate in some of those consultations. So I just wanted to know a little bit of the timeline and what are your plans? A little bit clear on that.
Through the chair, we're planning to have that second round of consultations start later this month, and it'll go towards the end of October.
So would it be just online, virtual, or?
We'll have online elements for the stakeholder meeting and for the public meeting, and then subject to public health guidance supporting it, we would try to do in-person pop-ups at busy stations so that we can talk to people in person about the project as well.
Oh, I see. So there will be pop-ups in the stations for people for riders, I suppose, is most important customers that we have. Good. I guess my next question would be, how far north on highway above Highway 401 that you're going to be proposing these alternative routes? Your extended bus routes or the dedicated shuttle. I saw on the origin destination map that is about up to Finch, because I live in Huntingwood. So would that be covered with your shuttle service or whatever you are trying to propose now? Or how far north up about 401 you're planning to do it?
So through the chair, we want to cast a broad net on that. If we choose the option where we extend existing bus routes, then the 169 Huntingwood would be one of those that we would look at. We had the idea that we would extend the most busy and the major bus routes that come from the north and the east. So the 131, the 133, the 129, routes like that. But that's the sort of input we'll want through the public consultation, is exactly which routes to extend. If it is just a dedicated shuttle, it would only operate between Scarborough Centre Station and Kennedy Station. But if it's an extension of routes, those routes would come from all over central Scarborough.
So would I assume that maybe up to Finch Avenue? Would it be, that's the northern kind of a border for the service to be
So
in?
through the chair, it depends on which route is extended. The 129, which goes up McCowan Road, goes all the way to Steeles and then into York Region, for example. And so you would potentially be able to board a bus at Steeles and travel all the way down to Kennedy Station.
I see. So, but I saw that you, on your presentation, Brimley and Midland is one of the most recommended routes that you're going to be doing as well, which really encompasses my ward too. So, okay. All right. So those are my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Jagdeo is next.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Eric, Scott, appreciate you walking us through that analysis for both options and evaluations. And Eric, I think your at-home background is super cool. So if I can get a big map like that, I'd love that. My questions are around the evaluation criteria, because it's almost, I like to argue that it's almost more important to understand what the evaluation criteria is, because at the end of the day, we can have all these options, but if they go through like this decision-making algorithm and it comes out to be unfavorable, then we're eventually cutting it. So I have a couple of questions around the evaluation criteria. Firstly, is the evaluation criteria taking into consideration only corridor options, or is it corridor operation options and the operating concept options? So are we going to be getting like a chart with 15 different scenarios, or is it 3 different scenarios? That's my first question.
Through the chair, it would be both. We would run through the evaluation framework for all of the possible combinations of alternatives. And so that's for the route extension concept or the shuttle concepts, and then along with that, each of the corridor options that are possible for it. So you're right that it would be a big matrix of possible options that we would evaluate.
Okay, so in theory, we're gonna see a narrative that is around like 13 different possible scenarios. Okay, cool. The second option, or the second question I have, is around the actual criteria itself. You've got about about 7 different criteria here. First is, are these going to be weighted, or are you looking at each one of these as exclusively weighted the same? Because I imagine when you spoke to the public and your survey results might showcase this, were there any variables here that were weighted higher or lower?
I might jump in, Madam Chair, if I may. We have talked about weighting of the evaluation criteria, and I've done that a lot in my career of project planning for the city. And we've actually decided to keep them all neutral. And instead, once we have the evaluation data and begin the evaluation, then to do a sensitivity analysis on the criteria and sort of say, what if, I don't know, minimizing delay to customers was the most important and we make it times 10 and all the other ones are only 3, and just kind of see how robust the solutions are. Because if there's not much difference between them, then you don't need to weight the criteria, if that makes sense to you. So we are thinking of doing it. The City of Toronto went down a path of trying to do this years ago, and they advised us that it ends up being quite difficult to do to the satisfaction of community, and that a sensitivity analysis like I've described is more useful if alternatives score very closely.
Okay, fine. That's fair. My last question on this is around the metrics themselves. Are these the actual metrics you're going to be using to measure them, or are these examples? Because some of them may not be mutually exclusive.
Through the chair, those are the metrics that we plan on assessing for each of the criteria. And we recognize that some of them do have overlap, Elements from customer experience do have some overlap with maybe things in equity, and that provides a linkage that we are cognizant about.
Okay, but that linkage also could compromise the measurement because of its overlap. So how do we ensure that we're not double weighting or double analyzing or taking into account one variable higher than the other if there's going to be that overlap? So for example, right, you have a metric on travel time, right, for customer experience, but then you also have a similar metric for journey time for equity considerations, right? If we look at this purely from a all weighted equally perspective, you're looking at travel time more than you are any other metric, for example. So how are you taking into consideration that overlap, which could skew your data in one way, shape, or form?
Through the chair, that's where we apply essentially the sensitivity tests that Kathleen mentioned, and a planning lens to it at the end. We're pretty confident that some of the options are going to bubble up as more favorable than others. And so if we reach a position where we do have conflicts between the criteria and the metrics that we use, we're pretty confident we'll be able to shift those out and see where they fall by using that sensitivity analysis and by just stepping back and saying, does this make sense? That's the trick in evaluating it, and that's really where we're looking for a lot of public input into it in the next phase.
Okay, sounds good. I just have like one very small comment around that sensitivity analysis. I just want to see what that looks like when you guys figure that out. That's it. Other than that, thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you. Our next questioner is Commissioner Osborne.
Yes, thanks, Eric and Scott. I have two kind of nuts and bolts technical questions. The first is about is the traffic on the right-of-way replacement two-way? Is there sufficient capacity to handle bi-directional bus traffic on that right-of-way?
Through the chair, our engineers have done a quick preliminary look at that. They haven't finished their work, but it certainly appears that between Ellesmere and Kennedy, there is ample room to have a two-way bus operation on the right-of-way that currently has the Line 3 service.
Okay, so that's actually an improvement from the last report. So that's really interesting. And the second question is the option of not continuing that right-of-way on the elevated part. And can you just confirm, maybe it's related to the question you just answered in part, but I'm curious why, what are the elements that make that kind of obviously less attractive cost, I'm assuming being a significant one, but I'm interested to hear what happens there when we elevate.
Through the chair, yes, cost is one thing. The cost of converting the elevated section would be higher than the at-grade section. There will be technical challenges in operating buses along there, although an early indication, not finished yet, suggests that it is actually possible. It would be very, very difficult to serve Midland Station with buses. There would have to be major reconstruction of the platforms at Midland Station because the platforms would not be at the correct height for buses. The buses would be operating through Scarborough Centre Station, again, on the upper level, which would then not remove would not provide the easy transfer at the bus transfer level that the other option would. And buses would have to join the right-of-way essentially at McCowan Yard. And so that's quite a ways away from Scarborough Centre Station. So a bus from the north, for example, coming down McCowan, would have to come down McCowan, probably then make a left turn onto Ellesmere and then a left turn into what is now a driveway into the yard, at which point it would then join the right-of-way and travel along there. So those are not insurmountable problems, but they add a complication. And for the relatively short additional distance between Scarborough Centre and Ellesmere, where we could simply run on the roadways and use existing ramps that exist at the Ellesmere underpass, we don't think that's going to work out as one of the best options, but it is in the hopper of things to be looked at.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner McKelvey. You're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my first question, I think Councillor Lai actually asked, I just want to confirm the next time this comes back to us is in January 2020?
Through the chair,
Sorry, 2022.
Through the chair, that's correct, yes.
Okay. And then my other question is about this adaptive reuse and what could happen, in a post-2030 world with the Scarborough subway done on time. I noticed that you're starting to engage with different stakeholders, including, city planning and as well as, Metrolinx and the Ministry of Transportation. Also, somebody just mentioned to me that they had flagged this to TRCA, and TRCA was also interested because there might be ways for active transportation connecting with the with the Metaway, for example, and really kind of reinvigorating that space in a greener way also. So have you had any conversations with TRCA, and are they aware of this, or any objection to forwarding this report in addition to all those people you have there to TRCA also?
Through the chair, we would definitely be okay to engage with TRCA. With the feedback that we've received from the phase 1 consultations, it's armed us and prepared us to work with city planning to have those next step discussions to see who else do we need to talk to now that we have some indication of what the emerging preferences from stakeholders.
Okay.
And we would welcome a chance to figure out how to work with the Metaway.
Okay. And then in terms of just vision for that space as well, what sort of discussions have you had with the city in terms of their city building priorities and their goals? We have goals of, by, oh gosh, I want to say I think it's 2050 that, all trips under 1 kilometer are walked or on a bike, all these big Transform TO goals, affordable housing goals, green space goals, all these visionary things. So public consultation is good, but how are you also interfacing with these broad strategies that are already in place?
Through the chair, that's where we're really relying on our colleagues at city planning to take the lead on, because they're the ones that are spearheading some of these other initiatives, and we want to make sure that they're plugged into what we're doing so that when we have a decision on the service, they will know what they have available then to advance those other city objectives and goals.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've got a quick question. It's just really one. Clearly, the price tag for delivering interim bus service and decommissioning the SRT is substantial. So my question is the province and their role in paying for these costs. Where are there conversations underway, or what's the status of that?
Through you, Chair Karen, if you could answer that, please, with some of the discussions we've had.
Through you, Chair, there have been some ongoing discussions with respect to reconciliation of costs that came out of the upload discussions in 2019, and the SRT cost is most certainly within the scope of those discussions. No resolution at this point, but we have made them very much aware of the timelines that we are working towards.
I won't move a motion on that, but I can expect that you'll continue those, having those conversations on a frequent basis so we can achieve a resolution.
Most certainly, and we've flagged the report back timing and everything as well. So that's information that continues to be shared.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move to speakers. Our first speaker is Commissioner Lai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank staff for doing such a comprehensive report and doing a good job in doing the consultation and all these things. This is a really difficult issue because in Scarborough, it's very important for Scarborough, especially in North Scarborough, because we needed a transit system before the subway is built. At McCowan and Shepherd, we need to move around our people up there. And I actually like the idea of all these options are quite interesting and quite good. I actually look forward to receiving the final report in January 2022, because this is a very, very serious case for us, for the residents of Scarborough North, and because it's very important that we support a very broad population area for the riders. So I hope you can everybody. The staff of TTC will continue your consultation and want to make sure that we make the best decision. Although this is not the decision we wanted to make, but I guess we just have to live with it. And I really like about speaking to the GO Transit, to Metrolinx, to have some alternatives for the people in Agincourt or in North Scarborough to come down the GO train, and that is a very important conversation. And I wishing everybody luck on that one and making sure that we will get a very, very good outcome out of that one. Thank you. Those are my my comments, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And everybody's promoting me today. I love it. Okay, Commissioner McKelvey, you're next.
I just have a minor amendment, just adding that this report is also forwarded to TRCA so they can start to become familiar with what's happening and maybe look at how they can engage in connectivity with our green space. Thank you. And thank you, staff, for all your great work on this.
Okay, thank you very much. That's easy breezy. I don't see any other speakers on this, so I'm going to move to putting forward Councillor McKelvey's motion that I'll be supporting. I think it actually helps the cause. So if we could put that up on the screen, and all those in favor, opposed, that carries, and then the actual item as stands before us. All those in favor, opposed, that carries. And again, thank you to staff. That was a very comprehensive report and presentation. It's very impressive, the work that's gone into this. I don't think anybody can call into question the amount of due diligence. So thank you again to Kathleen and Scott and Eric and the whole team. Item 6 is transit network expansion update. And there is no presentation on this, but Councillor McKelvey held it. So I don't know if you have any questions.
I do. I have two
Okay,
questions.
go ahead. Go ahead.
So the first question is about the work that's happening at Kennedy Station with the Scarborough Subway. And I'm just wondering how the interface has been going with Metrolinx to ensure that there is a way for the Eglinton East to continue out for the Eglinton East LRT. And I know there were some hiccups in getting that discussion going. So I just wanted to know how that is happening, because I think we want to make sure that whatever happens with building the Scarborough Subway, it doesn't preclude additional transit.
Through you, Chair Scott or Gary, could you answer that, please?
Yeah, I'll take this one, right? Yes, we're in conversation with Metrolinx on that to ensure that we have a path through for the Eglinton East. There's ongoing discussions just now. There's some technical challenges that we're looking at just now, but there is the discussions are ongoing at this point in time.
Okay, and then likewise, how have discussions been going with yourselves and Metrolinx regarding the Durham-Scarborough BRT? Has that engagement been going well? And, you know, I do have a motion just to flag, hopefully you're okay with it, about sharing the information you're gaining from Rapid TO, which, you know, was quick, non-intrusive, and, you know, made impact as opposed to kind of what they're doing out there. So how has that collaboration been going?
It's Scott here. I'll take that through the chair. TTC has been participating with Metrolinx on their planning of the Durham-Scarborough BRT, as has City of Toronto staff. We've given them our input and our requirements, and so far they've essentially met those requirements, and we've been happy with that. When it comes to the actual decision between a median busway, for example, or a curb busway east of U of T Scarborough, we don't have a strong opinion on that. West of U of T Scarborough, where we will have extensive and frequent service with lots of customers, we do favor a median BRT. So we're working with them on that. They are, of course, in the end, making the final decisions.
We are not a co-proponent on this project, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the last is related to that. I think there's been a lot of discussion about, you know, I live on the easternmost edge. I think there's many councillors around the edge of the city, you know, Councillor Lai as well in the north. Fair integration, where are we at in that discussion? Because there's a lot of talk about that. And, you know, if we do build this Durham BRT, are Scarborough residents going to be able to use it, or are they going to have to pay two fares? So I think we need to kind of push hard on this discussion to make sure that these projects that come through on our roadways are really also being able to be used by Toronto citizens. So where is that discussion at?
I'll address the Durham-Scarborough BRT portion, and Kathleen or others can talk about fair integration in general, but we have been very clear with Metrolinx that we want the Durham-Scarborough BRT designed so that TTC buses can run on it. We don't see it as something that is only run by a specialized BRT service, but rather it's a way to move our customers on our buses better than we do today.
And through you, Madam Chair, from a fare integration perspective, that's one of the matters that we have been talking about through our fare policy work. Angela Gibson will be bringing a report to the board in November, sort of about our preliminary thinking, and then a final report in February 2022. We won't have a recommendation for fare integration there, but we will have sketched out some of the parameters that would make it successful. It's the reason that we've partnered with YRT, our 905 partner with whom we have a subway into, 2 subways going to be into there. So it's something that's moving slowly from a policy perspective, from a staff perspective. And our CEO also sits on a fare and service integration table at the provincial level and co-chairs it, if Rick wanted to speak to that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lai, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple of quick questions on this item. Page 13 of the report, I read something about the Line 4 extension, Shepherd Subway extension from Don Mills Road to McCowan. I'm actually very thrilled to hear that, and that Metrolinx is moving this forward. What information on the current work can you share with me on this one?
Through the chair, we have no information from Metrolinx on their current work on that. They announced that in 2019 as a general principle, but our understanding is they may have started some work on it, but the major work can't really start until their capacity is freed up by some of the other projects completing.
I think Commissioner Lai, you might be frozen. If you could turn off your video, and then maybe we can hear your audio if you have additional questions. I don't know if you can hear me. Hopefully you can. You know what? We're going to come back to you. We're going to move to Commissioner Carroll and come back to you if you can get unfrozen. It's a good look though.
Okay.
Oh, she's
Can
back.
you hear?
Oh, she's back. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. I'm just wondering, my other further question on that was that it has not been cast in stone that this is going to happen. Am I
Through the chair, that our understanding is the province has announced it as a future goal. We don't really have any further definitive information on this.
Is it fair to us? Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner Carroll.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I could just, before I ask my questions, I'll just throw in there for Mr. Haskell and for Councillor Lai. The last time I asked that question, which was a month ago, it was still slated for 2040, which is code for, we don't know. But 2040 is still the date they're talking about. My question is about the Young expansion, which comes before that, which is part of the reason that Shepherd one is pushed out so far. I see that they're still quoting to you. Metrolinx would like to have the Young North extension by 2029, 2030. I guess it's hard for us to tell how much planning is going into that. Because we only know what planning would be in our own city limits. Is that still a realistic goal as far as you can tell from any conversation that you would be having about it?
Yeah, through the chair, that's the indication that Metrolinx are giving us at this point in time. That's the date. That's their aspiration to meet that date. Again, they're still doing some quite a bit of design work on that just now.
Yeah.
And again, we keep in contact with them. And again, it does have an impact on our station. So we're just, our terminal station at this point in time. So we're working very, very close with them, particularly on the early works on that one just now. So they're actually hoping to award the early work sometime mid next year for the work at Finch Station.
Okay. So, and early next year, so 2022 ballpark, that gives them 8 years to meet the deadline, possibly. my question is about that project. Part of the business case that has been made to Metrolinx in conversations that we're having separate from the conversations you're having here, I'm checking to see if they've in fact incorporated you in the discussion. So it's just I'm through you. I'm trying to check up on Metrolinx. We've been having a conversation with them about the importance of moving ahead with connecting the Leslie stop, Oriole stop it's called, on the Richmond Hill line to our line 4 at Leslie Station. There's an opportunity presenting itself right now because there's a development application that makes this possible. There is, I understand, a roughed-in tunnel that was done as part of the line 4 construction. We've been trying to press upon Metrolinx that they ought to take advantage of that opportunity, because when they begin to expand, it really cuts off mobility to Richmond Hill. There will be a time at which it gets very difficult to get to Finch Station while they're tunneling, and just giving people a go option where they just have to come as far as Leslie, and now they're connected up to all of TTC on higher order lines. But it seems to me that if that's going to happen, you would have to be incorporated in those conversations. Has that happened yet?
Through the chair, at a planning level, yes, the TTC has been involved up to a year or two ago with Metrolinx on planning for the relocation of Oriole GO Station. I'm not aware of any recent work on that, but I presume it's part of their GO expansion project. And you're correct, there is provision in the present Leslie Station for a better connection to a closer relocated GO Station.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So at least initial discussions did happen. Fantastic. Okay, that was my only question, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Commissioner Jagdeo, go ahead.
Sorry, I have one question, and I apologize if this is stupid, but I can't seem to wrap my head around this. What are sort of the inputs for labor and benefits in 2022? Because it's substantially higher than the other years, and headcount hasn't increased.
So through the chair, what we're seeing on page 2 is really laying out the 3-year costs for actually operating and maintaining across town. And so we had included some funds early in in the 21 budget that was associated with beginning to start the hiring process for all the positions when we anticipated an earlier start date. So now that we understand that we are the later start date, although not completely confirmed, what you will be seeing in the 22 budget is essentially the annualized impact of the money we put partially in 21, and therefore we don't really have more positions, because our original plan was to get the readiness in play in such a way that we were ready to go earlier in 2022. Hopefully that answers your question.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so I have a question just about the my favorite topic, the ATC. So obviously maintaining the consistent signaling system on line 1 and 2. This is stated in the report that would involve Metrolinx extending the ATC to the Young North extension and coordinating with the TTC on the line 2 ATC project. So what's the current status of those discussions with Metrolinx on this issue?
Through the chair. Again, with the high-level discussions with Metrolinx, again, we're currently working through, if you look at line 1, which is an extension, it's going to come along. So we're looking at working with the existing supplier on this one. So ourselves and Metrolinx, we've given them the technical details on that one so they can write it into their specifications. We're also talking about how we oversee that as well, because it could have an impact on our overall line and the operations and that, because once you add the extension, then there'll have to be some software changes to accommodate the full line. So we're in discussions on that as we speak at this point in time, and what that impact will be. But we'll be we are very much involved with Metrolinx in designing that specification, Madam Chair. And again, when you look at line 2, we're in discussions with them. We're looking at several options and how we contract on this one. And again, it comes back to when the Scarborough Subway extension will be finalised and how we integrate it into our overall programme for like ATC in line 2. So the way we're developing the programme just now, it allows us to align the Scarborough subway extension with our Line 2 works. And again, what we're trying to avoid, Madam Chair, is that they put an old system in, a fixed block system, into a new system, and we have to go back and retrofit it with ATC. So we're working very, very closely with them. And like I said, there's several options we're looking at. And one of the options could be that we do the installation of ATC on Line 2 on their behalf. So it integrates well with our schedule. So again, discussions are ongoing, and it's, you know, and we've got options that were presented to both CEOs in the past, and we're continuing to work through them.
Again, I'm not going to move motions on that, but I hope you'll continue to keep us filled in on that status. Thanks for that update. Yes. I have to say, as a Midtown City Councillor representing Davisville Village and Leaside, I can tell you people would love to know the official opening date for the Eglinton Crosstown LRT. That would be wonderful. Can anybody tell us what to expect on that front?
Again, through the chair, again, we've been having discussions with them, and we have been pushing them very hard to get a copy of the revised schedule. Again, because of the dispute that Metrolinx is having with Crosslinks just now, we're not able to get hold of that schedule. Again, but we've raised that up at the CEO level as well. And again, it's because of the contractual disagreements and claims that's coming through from Crosslinks through to Metrolinx. At this point in time, they're unable to give us that. They've given us indication that it'll be the latter part of 2022, but that's as much as they're prepared to give us at this point in time.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, if you can keep us informed on that, people would start popping the champagne and celebrating. It's had a big impact on pedestrian safety, local traffic, cyclists. That whole area has been deeply affected by the years of construction. So my entire ward, south part of my ward. So that's great. I think that's all the questions. We're going to move to speakers. The first speaker is Commissioner McKelvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a motion. So it's just asking that we forward reports evaluating rapid TO to Metrolinx and the Ministry for consideration as a design alternative for the Durham-Scarborough BRT on Ellesmere Road between Military Trail and Kingston Road. This is just echoing a member's motion that we had, I think it was in the July session with Mayor Tory, just asking, Metrolinx, think a little bit outside the box through this corridor where we have homes on both sides of the street. Residents will be making U-turns to access their driveways. They won't be able to make left turns. So just how can we get this implemented in the least disruptive way possible? So again, just kind of echoing those sentiments that were passed at council, but recognizing that, TTC is preparing these rapid TO reports and doing this great work. And I think we should share it broadly.
Thank you very much. And we'll now move to Commissioner Lai.
I guess I can speak very briefly. I just thought I had the Line 4 Shepherd Subway. Thank you for Councillor Carroll, Commissioner Carroll, for clarifying that it's not until 2040. But I just wanted to quickly say that it is very important for Scarborough to have that kind of a transit system. We're not just building transit. We're not infilling. We should have a master plan, a transit master plan, and this will be one of the systems that we're building. That I actually look forward to building that system. So those are just my comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for those comments, and Commissioner Carroll.
Just to quickly outline why I was asking the questions about a rather obscure thing. I think it's the thing that we have to bring to the table. We just experienced it in our last item when we were discussing how very disruptive to the network building a subway is going to be, and we're having to deal with the service around it. We just did that in terms of accommodating the construction of Line 3, but that's a kind of community expertise that we have that the rest of the GTA doesn't have yet. They do not have any idea what it does to a community when you start to build these lines, because even their BRT, if you look at across York region, it's a little bit easier to keep the traffic flowing while you're doing a BRT and there's no tunneling involved anywhere. We know that once that tunnel borer arrives, there's massive disruption. And so, you know, thinking ahead, looking for ways, how are they going to make their way to the TTC? You know, I keep pushing on this business of you guys in Richmond Hill need to maximize what people can do with the Richmond Hill GO line, because you're about to have the very spine of your folks' route to work. If they can't come down the 404, people are coming down through Yonge Street and Bayview, and all of that gets very choked as soon as you have a big subway situation, which is why, you know, I've been, well, it's convenient to me because people right nearby will then be able to walk to a GO connection and have a co-terminus hub if we can realize a connection between that line and the Leslie subway station on line 4. But it represents a way to cope with years of construction in the Yonge line expansion that, against our best advice, the province and Richmond Hill wants to expedite. And so I think we have to look for these opportunities now. We have to try and figure out what happens as we begin to expand the network through the GTA. I think we all have to be on the lookout as commissioners and certainly our staff. What are you folks going to do to keep mobility running and to maintain ridership getting onto mass transit while you're doing higher order mass transit for the first time in your municipality? So that's just one little piece. And I've had to keep digging away at it because it isn't on their radar. And sadly, if we didn't push it from the TTC end, it would be on their radar only after the tunnel borer was doing its work and the residents were saying, I can't get out of here and go to work. And so anywhere that staff can anticipate those opportunities and bring them forward here so that we can start advocating for them, I think it really helps the whole regional system. So I hope that that will be the case both from the staff end and the commissioner's end. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so if the motion can go up on the screen. And all those in favor of Commissioner McKelvey's amendment, just need to see. Yeah, okay, so that's fully adopted and the item as amended. Okay, so that now deals with item 6. I'm just going to release item 3, loan agreement to Toronto Coach Terminal. I had held that, but I've got my questions answered. So all those favor to adopt the report recommendations, that is approved. That carried. So that's just dealt with. Now we're on to item 7, McNichol Bus Garage Facility Maintenance. And Commissioner Carroll, you held that. So do you have questions of staff?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is part of, you know, an agreement that, well, I shouldn't say an agreement. It's a direction that that the commission has taken, that we are going to be contracting services at McNichol Bus Garage. But I'm a little confused by the math, because the evaluation here is that if we were to do this in-house, it's 29.5. The award we're being asked to make is for 28.6. So it's a little under $1 million spread over 10 years is the savings. But then later on, we use a different number to say that the savings is 11.2%. I wonder if you could explain the discrepancy between the two tables.
So through the chair, what the first table on page 2 identifies as the actual contract. So the actual cost, which is the 25 million, plus there's a contingency allowance of 0.7. That is the actual cost that you would see, which is the number that we've been using. There's a rebatable portion of the HST, so that's what makes up the difference. So that's really the contract value, as opposed to table 2, which is the actual cost of the contract services.
Oh, so when sorry, I got a little feedback there. So the HST rebate, it'll just show up. We see when we get the revenue back in the budget,
Right.
HST rebates are just all bundled into one line coming from various things. We just
Yeah.
get one big global number.
Yeah, so
Okay.
to be clear, that one's a contract value versus what is the actual cost of the delivery of the service.
Okay. And for the contingency allowance, so this is a 10-year contract. Is that a fixed price, or does the contractor have a facility to come back and look at having inflationary costs covered?
So through the chair, this is a fixed price contract for a 10-year period.
Oh, okay, so they'll bring in an annual cost, and the most they're ever going to get is 28.6. They can't come back and say we didn't inflation. Well, actually, it is. Inflation is now 3.5%, and so we need to up the contract. This is going to be sad.
This is predictable cost for 10 years, yes.
Predictable and guaranteed. That's the closed amount they're going to get, no matter how much it costs them to deliver over the decade.
That's correct.
Okay, great. So in one of the other items, we get a table letting us know how much the employees will make, and I understand that this contract has a number of different job descriptions within it. But can you give us a ballpark of what for the people actually delivering the service, what the wage differential is between doing it in-house and what they will be paying their employees?
Rich, are you able to answer that question? Rich Wong?
Yeah, through the chair, I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but the cost savings that the contractor would be realizing is through amalgamation of job duties. Instead of using licensed tradespeople, they would be using what they consider as building service persons. These are semi-skilled people that have knowledge of multi-disciplinary trades. They're not necessarily licensed. However, if an activity requires a licensed trades to sign off on it, they would certainly put a licensed journey person on that maintenance activity. So that's how they're getting the cost savings there. I know it doesn't answer your question, but that's sort of how they're getting the cost savings through.
Right,
Yeah.
right, through the wages of the people delivering the service.
Right.
Okay. Would it be possible to get those at a later date, or we pretty much have to wait until the contract is practicing and look at it over time? How would we find that out?
Through you, Chair, we'll work to get that information for the board.
Okay, thank you. That would be good to have, because my reason for wanting it is it's very much a global thing. But I can continue the line of questioning in the next item. I also wanted to look at one other thing. 1 second, Madam Speaker. Actually, no, it is in the next item. Sorry about that.
Okay, yeah.
Save that to the next item. Yeah.
Have any other?
I'll just speak to this one briefly.
Okay,
when
I think
it
you can
comes
just
time
go
for
ahead.
that.
You can go ahead because we don't have any other people with questions, commissioners. So if you want to go ahead with
Okay.
speaking.
So I am going to be asking questions again in the next item and the item after that. And I would ask that we give a little consideration to this. We are going to save some money over 10 years. That's true. Over 10 years, we are going to save a few $1 million. I think it's 3.3 million after you get back the HST rebate over 10 years, which means we're going to save $500,000 or fewer dollars per year. But I question this in a global sense. What we're talking about here is lowering the wages of the people who do the work. We're talking about moving them to non-benefited jobs. Yeah, they'll get sick leave, but several federal leaders are running on increasing that by law anyway. What they won't get is drug plans, dental care, etc. And what they won't get are living wages. They'll get something less, and I question that. We're going to end up paying for it as taxpayers and individuals in the long run anyway. And similar to reimagining ridership, I think we have to reimagine what our policy goals are. Are we setting the bar for economic recovery? Are we setting the bar for ending what right now is a tsunami of homelessness in our city? 700 new people a month being added to our homelessness rolls has to stop at some point. And having a policy goal to do whatever we can to lower all of our wages is not how you end homelessness. It's not how you house anyone. Not providing the kinds of things that the public sector used to provide, which is, helping you pay for your prescriptions, which means helping you manage your own preventative health, eye care, making you safer on the job, all of those things that people used to gravitate to the public sector for. When we contract out, when we second source, call it whatever you want, when we choose not to have our own employees to do it anymore and to use the public sector benefit structure, what we're doing is causing ourselves costs elsewhere. You are spending a fortune right now, each and every one of you, me included, on whether it's out of your income tax pocket or your property tax pocket. And believe you me, some of it's coming out of your actual property tax, which makes no sense because that has nothing to do with your wealth. But we're covering the costs of not affording livable wages for good hard work by covering it in running more and more shelters, 28 hotels full of homeless people who have fallen through the cracks because living wages are not a policy target anymore. And so I'm going to question this each time we endeavor to lower the wages of people who serve the TTC. And that's all second sourcing is. That's where all the savings are, just paying people less who are pushing a broom through the bus garage, who are making minor operational repairs, all of that stuff. That's how you're achieving the savings, and you're paying for it somewhere else. To me, that's a bad business case. You're not really saving any money at all. You're just pushing the cost somewhere else. And I would submit that when someone falls through the cracks, the amount of support services they need to get back on track, to get into housing, and the amount you're spending on building the housing so that it can be affordable, you're putting more and more public involvement in what used to be very private, where a person finds a home, only to make it more private in the transit system. But you're just now publicizing where everyone puts a roof over their head because no one wants to pay them enough to put their own roof over their head. And so the business case just really isn't there. It just isn't. So I'll be questioning it each time. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't see any other speakers on this item, so I will move the staff recommendations before us. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We're going to move now to item 8, which is streetcar vehicle cleaning and servicing. And I believe, Commissioner Carroll, you held this item, so go ahead with questions if you have them.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I believe this is the report that does actually give us, because it's easier to do here. To be fair to Ms. Wong, it's easier in this report because they're the.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Pardon?
I'm sorry. There's deputants on this one. I forgot.
Oh, okay.
Because we haven't had them yet, so I wasn't thinking. So my apologies. We should start with our deputants. So go ahead, Chris Ann, if you could call up the deputations.
Certainly. The first deputant is Aleem Thorani. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Aleem Thorani. I'm an executive board member for AT Local 113. I just want to say you have a big decision to make today about the quality of jobs at the TTC. More than that, this is about your vision for Toronto. It's also about making sure management tells you the whole story, because you are responsible for the decision you make, not them. The report before you says you are going to save money. This is simply not true. Keeping the work in-house will cost more than $200,000 less than contracting out. And that's before the administrative and legal costs of contracting the work. The details are in our correspondence, and I would be happy to explain further if you have questions. The report says it supports TTC's access and equity goals because the private company employs women and visible minorities in large numbers. Think about that for a minute. TTC is arguing that hiring women and racialized people into cleaning jobs is somehow progressive. You're not even voting today to make jobs available to these equity-seeking groups. They are already well represented amongst TTC's cleaning workforce. Today, people working in these jobs have access to TTC training and can move up in better paying, more highly skilled jobs. You are voting today on whether to take these same jobs and remove the opportunities that provide a path to a skilled trade and a better life. I know how important it is. I can give you my own personal experience. I was fortunate enough to be a summer student at the TTC, where I could gain good pay and go to school at the same time and reduce my student loan debt. Not only that, but then I graduated from business admin and motive parts apprenticeship program through Centennial College and was given an opportunity to work full-time at the TTC. Now I'm in an executive position representing over 12,000 members at the TTC, and that is all because of this company. So TTC wants you to deny access to career and training opportunities for your workers. And for what? It will cost the city more by adding extra layers of contract administration and private profit. It would also violate City Council's direction on protecting transit as a public service through the Keep Transit Public, providing all workers with adequate paid sick days, and supporting an equitable and inclusive pandemic recovery. I strongly encourage you to at least defer the report and instruct staff to continue negotiations openly and transparently. Thank you for your time, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Commissioner Carroll.
Yes, I'm wondering if you could elaborate for us how your math comes up with this is actually costing $200,000 more. How do you arrive at that?
So we have provisions in our collective bargaining agreement that give us an opportunity to sort of, I guess, compete or keep our work in-house. At the same time, we have been through multiple presentations with the TTC and given them multiple reasonable alternative solutions. That is sent to you through our correspondence, so you can look through that. But we have talked about changing our workforce, converting some of our positions, all while keeping the work in-house.
Okay. And you may be able to answer this for me as an executive. That'll save me some time later. So we're going to if we award TBM today, we know that they'll be paying the cleaners, I think it's $16.95 an hour. Would you be able to tell us on average what they would make if we were using in-house employees?
So it depends. So what we have proposed would be entry-level positions.
Right.
Okay. At that point, they come in at entry-level positions, and it would be a wage group 2. I don't want to get too much into all the specifics, but typically they would start at around $21 an hour.
$21 an hour. Okay. So
give or take. I don't have the exact package in front of me.
Still only taking about $3,200 a month and paying $1,700 of that out in rent. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have another deputant, Chris-Anne, if you could call them.
While we wait for the deputant to unmute, the next deputant is Jamal Myers. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, members of the TTC Board of Commissioners. My name is Jamal Myers, and I'm deputing today to address the TTC's proposal to privatize streetcar vehicle cleaning and servicing. I support keeping transit public and strongly urge TTC commissioners to consider the impact on equity-seeking groups if these jobs were to be contracted out. Moreover, I strongly urge TTC commissioners to ask the TTC to analyze and publicly disclose the potential impact of contracting out these jobs on members of equity-seeking groups, particularly women, Black, Indigenous, and racialized residents. I grew up in Scarborough and was raised by a single mother in Toronto community housing. For me, education was my way out of poverty. Yet, as we all know, education is not free. To pay for my undergraduate degree in political science at the University of Western Ontario, I worked as a TTC summer student at Greenwood Yard for 3 summers in 2003, 2004, and 2005. In my role, where I was responsible for cleaning and maintaining subway trains from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m., I witnessed firsthand the professionalism, dedication, and pride of work members of Amalgamated Transit Local Union 113 displayed when cleaning and maintaining the TTC's fleet of subway cars, which are crucial to keeping Toronto moving. These values, professionalism, dedication, and pride of work, were so important for my professional and personal development, and they are values I continue to practice and hold dear 16 years later in my current position as a corporate lawyer with TD Bank. The TTC's summer student program has provided generations of Torontonians from equity-seeking backgrounds, including many of whom grew up poor like me, with the financial security and economic stability needed to complete their studies and contribute to their households and communities. Many TTC summer students use their summer employment opportunities to land good, full-paying jobs with the TTC, first as entry-level car house cleaners, and then eventually parlaying their experiences into other and likely better-paying employment opportunities with the TTC. The same is true for the men and women who do these jobs year-round. Many of them use the car house position to get their foot in the door and then go on to other roles in the TTC. If these jobs are contracted out, these types of opportunities for equity-seeking groups and students will no longer be available. In closing, throughout the pandemic, the City of Toronto has often claimed that its goal is to build back better. The goal is an admirable one and one we should all aspire to. To me, building back better doesn't just mean repairing and restoring the physical infrastructure that makes our city great, but also investing and building up the people of this city, particularly those who have historically been excluded from its prosperity, by providing them with and maintaining employment opportunities that allow them to provide for themselves, their families, and make positive contributions to their communities. While I can't comment on the exact amount of savings the TTC is projected to save from the contracting out of these services, I can tell you that a report that doesn't fully analyze the likely negative impact on equity-seeking groups who have historically used these jobs to secure a dignified living for themselves and their families is incomplete. Moreover, it is certainly not in keeping with the spirit of building back better, as the proposed starting wages of these contracted out jobs will pay far less than the TTC and offer significantly less benefits to workers, which are crucial for providing a dignified living in an expensive city such as Toronto. Thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to depute today, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I don't see any. Chrisanne, do we have another? That was it, just the two. Okay. So now we'll move into committee and to questions. We had started with Commissioner Carroll and we'll continue, and then to Commissioner McCully.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. It's interesting, the comment the last deputy made reminded me of a part in the report that I found curious. We have as a standing item in any report, equity and accessibility matters. And it says a cornerstone of the TTC's corporate plan is accessibility, and as a proud leader in providing accessible transit, blah, blah, blah. This is supported, so inclusive transit services, this is supported through the second sourcing of cleaning and daily servicing activities on LF-LRV vehicles. How does that support equity and accessibility matters?
Through the chair, I think it's a general comment that the cleanliness of our vehicles to ensure that we have reliable and safe transit for all of our customers. I think it's just a general statement to say that, you know, as we continue to do all of our maintenance work, that all serves the greater good of accessibility.
Okay, I don't know what's going on with the clock because it now says 4 minutes, but I'm gonna continue because I just started. Okay, so maybe I'll speak to that because I'm a bit confused about it. So I think this is the one where it does actually quote the cleaners will receive $16.95 an hour. I wonder if staff wanted to comment. I asked the deputant, was he in the ballpark of what in-house it would cost to do this? $16.95 for TBM employees. How much for TTC employees?
Through the chair, yes, I can confirm that the deputant was approximately correct. It's a range between $21 an hour to $28 an hour within 24 months, approximately.
Oh, okay, thank you. And that's not including benefits.
No, benefits would be on top of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In this case, we're going with a much shorter term contract. Wonder, is that, or it's because we're testing the waters? We're not going with a decade-long contract such as we are to set up the bus garage for service. We're going with 2 and then additional optional years. Do you want to? Could you explain that?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Rich Wong, our Chief of Vehicles, to respond to that. Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, we're going through a 2 years and 2 months there. It lines up with the ending of the bus maintenance service line contract. There's 2 thoughts here. We can extend and stagger the awards or stagger the future contracts between buses and streetcars, or we could go out and see if there's through economy of scales, if there's more cost savings through bundling the 2 contracts together.
Okay, but vis-a-vis bundling, I guess that's a consideration you could write into the report later. But these workers they're organized at TBM, are they not?
When you mean organized?
Yes, they're unionized workers.
Organized, unionized workers.
Yes.
So they would they be captured under our definition of the TTC as an essential service? They negotiate with TBM, not with us. So what happens if they want to go on strike?
Through the chair, at this juncture, they're not captured by the essential services legislation. That's distinct and separate.
Okay. And are there any inflationary causes in this one, or again, that's a fixed cost? That 3.71 is what they're going to earn and no more over those 2 years and 2 months.
Through the chair, it's Rich. That is a fixed cost.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Thanks, Madam Chair.
And Commissioner McKelvey?
We had a motion later on the agenda that talked about community benefit program hiring, and I'm just wondering, with our contracts that we put out, is there similar requirements? Can we ask for hiring local youth? Can we ask for hiring equity deserving groups? Like, how do we incorporate that, or what needs to be done for that going forward?
Through you, Chair, could I ask Keisha or Michael to respond to that?
So it's Michael. Let me turn on my video. Through the chair. So we're working on a revamped procurement policy, and as part of the procurement policy, you will have social or equity or some ESG type of requirements. So as part of the procurement policy coming forward, that will be addressed in terms of what you put in your contracts going forward for community benefits or diversity related matters.
So given that that document's not released, is there anything in this contract on that?
I'd have to refer back to procurement, but I don't think this contract had any specific requirements from a diversity or a neighborhood improvement area hiring practice. No.
Okay, but that's somewhere we'd like to go with things.
Yes, the procurement policy, when it's finished, has a specific, or will have specific kind of social or governance, whatever we want to call it, ESG type requirements.
Okay. How many positions are impacted through this, and is there any requirement to consider those people in this contract, or are we doing anything with them through other offerings within the TTC?
Through the chair, there's 23 impacted positions in this circumstance with fewer actual personnel who would be impacted, but it's really important to note that nobody will lose a job on account of this. We have various provisions and processes identified mutually through the collective agreement and associated regulations, and we'll work with our labor partners to ensure placement of these employees.
Okay. And then the cost, and there's disputes on, from deputants and discussion around that. Do we have a look back on our contracts regularly to say, were we successful in actually saving money here? And how do we look at that data in the future? How do we learn from that? How do we improve?
So through the chair, I mean, from a direct financial perspective, clearly, and in this case where our existing cost is higher, we will actually demonstrate a reduction in the budget to reflect the costs or the savings as outlined in this report. So there's a direct reporting out and transparency around that. And then, of course, in terms of the other efficiencies that would be identified, that will be through the business operation through Rich's area. And there's, various metrics that we manage with the contractor that are specified through the contract that we would then be monitoring to ensure that quality.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple questions that we can move to speakers. My understanding is TBM promotes fair and equitable treatment of employees and provides competitive wages, benefits, and pension plans. Is that accurate?
Through you, Chair, that is correct.
Okay. And I just want to just again reiterate something that Commissioner McKelvey identified, and just make sure it's crystal clear that no employees will be terminated or laid off as a result of this initiative. Is that correct?
Again, through you, Chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move to speakers. Commissioner, my mute went off. Vice Chair De Laurentiis, if you could go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to speak in favor of giving the CEO and the management team the tools that will allow them to manage with some flexibility the resources that we put in front of them. Also to be mindful of the fact that we are always, as a transit authority, under pressure to reduce fees. We talked earlier about the fact that we're going to need financial support we're going to seek financial support from other levels of government in order to maintain the level of service that we provide. So, as a board, I consider it part of my fiduciary duty to ensure that the CEO uses the tools that he has and we do not constrain him. Clearly, we have to hold him to account to demonstrate that he's using those tools appropriately. And that includes these contracting out. I think we're giving through the questions that have been asked, there's an impression left that somehow there's something nefarious or unfair going on. And I certainly do not have that view. I consider these, the CEO executing and the management executing these and using these tools as the appropriate execution of their mandate as managers and caretakers of the TTC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other speakers on this item? Commissioner McKelvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I will support the report today. And thank you for the comments about, the hiring practices of the contractor. But I think this does underscore that we need a policy that makes sure those principles that we find important of equity are incorporated into this. And also that there's always statements about existing employees. And in this case, it was very good to hear on the record that those existing 23 employees will still have jobs. And I understand the need to move forward, but I think we always have to keep those questions up front of mind. What is happening to our existing employees? How are we treating them? And how are we going to ensure that employees that are through any of these contracts are treated?
And Commissioner Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Fiduciary duty is a very good thing to keep in mind. Our duty of care, our duty of obedience and loyalty to the entity we serve as a board of directors, absolutely important. It's why earlier this morning, I wasn't even thinking of the word fiduciary when I did it, but earlier this morning, while the CEO's report highlighted on a page about 400 vehicle operator jobs are going to be posted before the end of this year to replace retirements and do service growth. And we want 40% of them to be women. And I tweeted out, please apply for these jobs and the skilled trades jobs. But if we're going to offer jobs, they do have to be our jobs. Once you contract out, you don't have control over who they're offering it to. I don't take any equity comfort from contracting out so that TBM can offer this job for $4 an hour less than what low-earning women and community members of diversity are doing. We're only doing this so that we can pay people less. That's the only reason we're doing this. And it's not as if it would be an embarrassment of riches to keep the jobs here. TBM is going to pay people $16.95. I challenge any one of us to live on $31,000 a year indefinitely, because for many people this will be a long-term job, not a starter job. They'll be there a long time, but they'll take home about $2,300 a month. And right now, the average one-bedroom apartment costs $1,712 a month in the city of Toronto. So I dare say they're probably not going to live in the city of Toronto. And all you'd gain by keeping it in-house is they'd make $21 an hour, which means they take home probably about $2,800 a month, and still have to figure out how to come up with $1,700 a month in rent. Yes, they will hire women, because sadly, women often end up in the lowest paying jobs, don't they? What is the beauty of in-house? What our own bargaining agreement says is that if we hire a woman to be a streetcar driver, she's going to make the same as the man who is a streetcar driver. Nothing gave me more pride than to happen to be going up Bathurst and see a woman in her TTC uniform leaning against her streetcar, eating an apple and taking a break before getting back on to do her next route. So it's not just hiring the women, but taking care of them, making sure that it really is a high value job, which makes her a high value earner in the city of Toronto, able to pay taxes into the tax coffers, and then able to help support the TTC, because unfortunately, far too much of what funds the TTC is coming out of property taxes. I take very seriously that we have to ask the federal government to help us get through COVID. But for 20 years preceding COVID, our real funding problem has not been that we can't save money by exiting out jobs and making someone pay them $4 or $5 an hour less. Our real problem has been is that we are still the only major transit system in a major city in a G7 country that is not getting state or provincial funds for its operating budget. That's the real problem. And I am very loyal to the TTC and continuing to ask for that and demand it, because we've now survived without it for 25 years, since 1995. That's me living out my fiduciary duty. Exiting employees so that someone else can underpay them is not how I'm going to execute my fiduciary duty, but I am still executing it. Thank you, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And I will move the motion to adopt the report recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. And our next item, we do have a deputation, and so I will pass it over to Chris Ann. This is COVID-19 vehicle disinfecting services. This is our last item today.
Thank you, Chair. Our deputant is Jean-Francois Obregon from Voice for Transit. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I will be speaking about Voice for Transit, which is a transit advocacy group composed of Ryerson and University of Toronto alumni. We work in finance, policy, analytics, and planning. We were founded in March 2019. We take an evidence-based approach to addressing delays, overcrowding, and transit equity across Toronto's transit systems. We released a report on August 30th that detailed the experiences of essential workers and regular riders during the pandemic, whom we interviewed. And our report was motivated by some of the overcrowding that was reported early on in the pandemic on 10 bus routes relied on by essential workers. These bus routes are heavily populated by visible minorities and essential workers who rely specifically on TTC to bring them to their workplaces. And a number of these bus routes are in suburban boroughs that has seen lesser drops in ridership throughout the pandemic. All the essential riders that were essential workers that were also regular riders that we interviewed from our data are employed in retail, janitorial and cleaning, support services, and most importantly, healthcare. The relevance to the agenda item, it's both to the vehicle disinfection services as well as the contracting out item that was just talked about. And I believe the streetcar disinfection item is that our interviewees cited cleanliness as the second most cited issue of concern. We interviewed 6 workers who rode regularly during COVID. One from East Scarborough even commented that the cleanliness did not change much in their vehicles and on their routes. Something that was also relevant to these agenda items is that we have not seen the clear publicly disclosed definitions of the words clean, cleanliness, hygienic, or sanitary come from the TTC. We're aware that ridership has dropped compared to pre-COVID-19 levels, but that it is steadily increasing. So our concern is how can we ensure everyone is safe as things reopen? In terms of hygiene, the TTC claims that vehicles are cleaned twice a day. Masks have been made mandatory and social distancing is in effect. Since July 2021, cleanliness complaints are up 10%. And also, like I said, we have a number of quotes in our report on this issue. So some of the things that we recommend coming out of this report that we released a few weeks ago is that cleanliness continues to be prioritized because it is a main driver of, we interpret, of ridership loyalty based on how often it was cited in our interviews, and it will also help to bring back lost ridership during the pandemic. And another item that we think could be relevant to help fund this is that in the capital investment side, you can use the proceeds of City of Toronto bonds to make capital investments in disinfection and ventilation equipment. This is somewhat related, but since the airborne transmission of COVID-19 may still be the culprit of reduced ridership, ventilation upgrades are needed, especially in subway and bus platforms, as was highlighted in a capital investment document approved by the board, I believe, late last year. So because under the City of Toronto Act, you can't use bond proceeds for operating investments, what we are also recommending here is that capital investments be made using those bond proceeds, and the TTC make that request. Thank you. I can take your questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for this speaker? Okay, thank you very much for your deputation today. We'll move into committee and questions for staff. Commissioner Carroll.
Thanks. I wonder if staff could share with us, I don't know if you can put it up on the screen, but can we get an itemization of the 14 million or the 12 million the year before for the disinfection? How did they break down the costs for you?
Rich, do you have that information? Josie's looking.
It's just an awfully big number, not for us to have any breakdown. How many of that was adding cleaners? How much of it was buying the equipment or the disinfectant itself?
Yeah, through the chair, the cost is primarily labor. I'd have to get the breakdown from TBM if we want material cost as well. But it's primarily labor to spray all 4 fleets. And it also includes non-revenue vehicles.
And if I could, Commissioner, if I could, and I don't want to take up your time, but as I said in the opening remarks, since the Public Health Ontario has changed the guidelines, this was to do it twice a day continually. We know that we're going down to once a day when it comes to bus and streetcar on October 1st. Likely, possibly, I should say, as well as line 2, and we're waiting for the MERV 13s for line 1. So, Rich, could you just tell us what you expect the overall cost to be now that we know that we're going lower with that?
So with reducing to 1 time a day for the remainder of this year, that would there would be a cost avoidance of about $2 million.
So the 14 is an upset limit, but it might be much less.
Correct. And then moving forward into 2022, if we maintain at 1 time a day, there's a cost avoidance of about $7 million.
And I asked because there was a big to-do at one point where we were told we could stop worrying about fomites. They're not an issue. Do we have updated assessment as to why we have to do it twice a day? Why we're continuing to do this?
Well, I'll speak to that, Rich, because as we were talking, the Public Health Ontario is still have it in their guidelines that everybody does it once a day. So what we do as an industry, we work through OPTA, and we're all consistent in our actions moving forward.
So we have to wait for them to change their guidelines.
That's what we're doing. Correct.
Okay. If I could, even if at a later date, if I could get that breakdown of 12 million in 2020 and 14 million, how they're spending it, I would just think that was a part of contract management that we should just get a little detail on.
Through the chair,
Even if you want to send it to my office, it would be helpful.
Through the chair, we'll do a breakdown for all the commissioners.
That would be great. Thanks.
Okay, Shelley Carroll stole my questions. So we are going to move to speakers, I think, because I don't see anybody else. So go ahead, Commissioner Carroll, and I'll say a few words too.
Yeah, I asked those questions. It's not that I'm trying to give our staff a hard time, but we spend an awful lot of time with the Auditor General lately, and I think it's important in the fury of trying to respond to COVID, not to lose track of the fact that we do have to know a little bit of these details in contract management and keep track. You don't want to go back later and find we were using the wrong disinfectant, we were doing way more than we needed to, and so on and so forth, and not have a sense of, and they billed us for this many employees, but no one ever saw them. We just, when things are happening fast and furious, and then you find out they're going to happen for as much as 2.5 years, I think we really have to get the breakdown, and that's why it's not me not trusting our staff. I just think this is where we stop now as a board of directors and say, let's have a handle on the details of that pandemic that just happened. That way, things go down in history as being lessons learned. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll just say a few words on this, and just because I've kind of been paying close attention. There's been some media attention on this, and the end result here is corrosion, which is a whole nother set of problems we'll have to deal with down the road. But I do question the frequency, and I'm very happy that the CEO has already acted. I did send him a little note when this last agenda broke, asking him to review this, because it's very important that we're not overdoing things. So we want to be careful and we want to be cautious. At the same time, these are guidelines, and sometimes these things happen too slowly. So and there's some questions around the transfer of COVID and how it actually happens, this is maybe not a focus. We do want the system to be clean. Absolutely. That's our top priority, safe, clean, sterilized. But at the same time, I think we have to ask the TTC staff, the CEO, and the team focused on this to just keep us in the loop and abreast of how this is unfolding, because these are guidelines. They're not laws, and they're not set rules. And we are a big organization that has to look at the effects of this. So I do hope that we can keep a close eye on this issue, and that the CEO will act accordingly as things unfold related to the guidance, and whether we really need to be doing some of the things we're doing. As you know, it disrupts service, and there's nothing that irritates residents more and riders is having their service disrupted. It's already challenging enough without this piece of the puzzle. So I just wanted to relay that to the staff team to make sure that we're keeping a close look at this and what we're doing, and the necessity of it, and of course the long-term impacts. And that's really it. So I will ask someone, or one of us, to move this item. Okay, Commissioner Osborne has her hand up, and all those in favor? That's adopted. I just want to do a quick announce. Oh, did somebody want to say something?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I am very sorry. I did not do this earlier because I didn't want to come up the works, and I knew my vote would be a sole vote, but I have social media people haranguing me now. I have to ask the board's indulgence if it is possible to reopen 7 and 8 and be recorded in the negative, so that my vote matches my speech. I didn't ask you to record the vote in the interest of expediting, but people are now being silly about it.
Okay, so I'm going to go back and reopen. Just trying to find my numbers here. Which number it is? Oh,
item 7 and 8.
Yeah, 7 and 8. So 7 would be the first. So I'll reopen item 7 and ask Chrisanne, the clerk, to walk us through a recorded vote.
Thank you, Chair. Your vote, Commissioner Carroll.
Is opposed.
Vice Chair De Laurentiis.
In favor.
Commissioner Jagdeo.
In favor.
Commissioner Lalonde.
In favor.
Commissioner McKelvey.
Favor.
Commissioner Minnan-Wong.
In favor.
Commissioner Osborne.
In favor.
Chair Robinson.
In favor.
Thank you. The vote carries, or the motion carries 7-1.
Thank you very much. Item 8 is streetcar vehicle cleaning and servicing. So I'll pass it back to you, Chrisanne.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Carroll.
Opposed, and just so I don't have to speak again, I appreciate this huge indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair De Laurentiis.
In favor.
Commissioner Jagdeo.
In favor.
Commissioner Lalonde.
In favor.
Commissioner McKelvey.
In favor.
Commissioner Minnan-Wong.
In favor.
Commissioner Osborne.
In favor.
Chair Robinson.
Favor.
Again, the motion carries on a vote of 7-1.
Okay, I just want to wrap up the meeting by just announcing that ACAT is looking for new members. Until September 21st, people can apply. So please share that as commissioners, spread the word. We are looking for new members. Forward anyway, and not recess for lunch. So I hope that worked for everybody's schedule. And I would now say we are formally adjourned. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.